Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to the velvet-curtained, gaslit world of Victorian England, but don't let the lace and mahogany fool you. You're not one of the fancy ones in this story. Nope, you're a servant, and tonight you'll find out why that absolutely sucked. You're at the bottom of the ladder, the lowest of the low. You mop what no one wants to see, you rise before the sun, and you go to sleep with a body so sore it feels like it borrowed someone else's bruises. And here's your reality check. You probably won't survive this life past 40. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? I always like to know who's on this journey with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your morning starts with a jolt. It's 4 AM, pitch black outside, and your body screams at you to stay under your thin wool blanket. Too bad, you've already overslept by 30 seconds. You know this because the kitchen maid banged her broom against your attic wall. She's been up since 3 boiling water, and she's not in the mood for your whining. You dress in the dark. There's no candle left for you tonight. You fumble for your stiff cotton uniform, still damp from yesterday's scrub and cold enough to make your teeth clench. Your hands, rough and cracked, tremble as you tie the apron strings. Downstairs, the house is still asleep. Upstairs, the master snores behind thick velvet drapes. But you're awake, and your first task is simple: clean everything. The floors are filthy, of course. Mud from the master's boots, soot tracked in from the scullery, stray bits of flour from the cook's nightly tantrum. You grab a bucket of tepid water, hot would be a luxury, and a brush with bristles sharp enough to scrape knuckles. The hallway tiles stretch out before you like a punishment, and that's just the beginning. Scrubbing floors in Hobants gives you time to think, but you really shouldn't. That's how you fall into melancholy. And melancholy gets you dismissed. No letter of reference, no hope of a new position. Better to focus on the rhythm. Dip, scrub, slide, wring. You feel the rough stone under your fingers. It's always cold, even in summer the floor stays cold. You've decided the house hates you. By 5 the butler will be down. He'll grunt if you're late and mutter something about standards. You don't dare answer. Speaking too much is considered insolent. You're background noise. A presence that shouldn't be noticed unless something's gone terribly wrong. Meanwhile, the fire needs lighting. You crouch in front of the hearth, your knees popping with the effort. Yesterday's ashes are still there, mocking you. You scoop them out with a warped metal pan, trying not to inhale too much of the choking dust. Then you build the fire. Small sticks first, then coal, arranged just right. If it smokes too much, the lady of the house will accuse you of trying to kill her. You light the match with a prayer. Here's a fun fringe fact. Some households made servants use leftover grease or even dried animal dung to help fires catch faster. Smells exactly how you'd imagine. By 6 AM, your hands are filthy, so's your apron, which means you'll be scolded for presenting poorly. Never mind that you've just single-handedly made the house livable for its waking inhabitants. As the sunlight peeks in through the windows, not for you of course, you're already exhausted. There's a pot of tea to make, porridge to prepare and eggs to collect. You hurry outside to the coop, skirt damp with dew, where the hens give you side-eye like you're stealing from them personally. You snatch the eggs, dodging beaks, and run back in before cook yells. And she does yell. Always. The kitchen is her kingdom, and you are a worm crawling beneath her crusty shoes. She demands hot water, fresh towels, and quiet, simultaneously. You nod and obey, stomach growling. You haven't eaten yet, and you won't until everyone else is done. That's the rule. Here's something historians still argue about. Just how many hours a day a Victorian servant worked. Some records claim it was 14, others suggest it was closer to 18. Either way, your feet agree, it's too many. You're standing in the scullery now, hands plunged into near boiling water. You don't get gloves. Those are for people who matter. Your fingers turn red, then white, then red again. You're washing yesterday's dishes while preparing for today's avalanche of porcelain. One crack and it's out of your wages. Wages that barely cover your keep. Another bell rings. That sound. That tiny innocent ding from the master's chamber. It echoes through the servants' hallway like a gunshot. Each bell is labelled with a nameplate. You stare at it. Master bedroom. Your stomach drops. You wipe your hands, throw on a fresh apron, and run. This bell system is your curse. A network of wires and clappers designed purely to remind you how low you sit on the ladder. Each ring means a command, and commands must be followed immediately. no matter what you're in the middle of. Even if it's just to fetch a glass of water or listen to the master complain about his gout. When you reach the door, you knock twice, then wait. Always wait. He doesn't answer, but you know to go in anyway. He's in his dressing gown, reading yesterday's newspaper, which he throws at you without looking up. It lands in a puddle from your wet shoes. He scowls. You leave the room backwards, apologising even though you have no idea what for. Downstairs another bell rings, and another. It's only 7:15. That's when you realise the rest of the house is waking up. And your day? It hasn't even really started yet. You barely have time to exhale before the cook is yelling again. Her voice could peel wallpaper, and it's echoing down the hall like cannon fire. "Where's that water, you mare?" she screams, already elbow deep in bread dough. You bolt back to the scullery, your shoes squelching slightly from the earlier trip to the chicken coop. One of your laces has come undone, but stopping to fix it would be a declaration of laziness, so you let it flap, quietly praying you don't trip and die before breakfast is even served. The kitchen is its own little hell. Not metaphorical, actual, sweltering, flame-heaving hell. Even in winter, it's boiling in here, thanks to the massive iron range that never truly cools. You sweat through your stiff uniform before 8 a.m, and by lunchtime you smell like ash, grease, and silent rage. There's no airflow, no windows you're allowed to open. Just heat, sweat, and constant motion. The cook demands a rolling boil for everything, and you're the one responsible for keeping the kettle filled and scalding. You drag a copper pot across the uneven floor to the iron tap. The pump groans, and a stream of cloudy water spits out. It takes forever to fill. You use the downtime to stir the porridge, feed the fire, and dodge the slap that's coming when the cook notices the butter is slightly too soft. You might wonder, did anyone care about servant safety in a kitchen like this? No. Accidents were frequent. Burns, cuts, even full-on explosions from blocked flues. But if you injured yourself, it was your fault for being careless. And if you couldn't work, you were out. No job, no income, no room, no food. The street didn't offer workers' comp. Speaking of burns, your arm still aches from last week's kettle spill. The cook had flung open the oven door without warning, and you, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, took the blast of steam straight to the wrist. You never complained. What would be the point? She has the housekeeper's ear. And the housekeeper is basically judge, jury, and executioner in your universe. By now, the first footman has arrived. He looks clean, polished, and freshly shaven. That's because he didn't have to boil his own water. His job is to stand around looking important, maybe polish some silver, and carry heavy things if the master has guests. He gives you a look as you stagger past him with a tray of toast and jam, as if to say, "Be invisible, please. You're oblige." There's a debate among historians about how rigid the roles really were below stairs. In theory, each servant had a clearly defined set of tasks, but in practice, the lower your rank, the blurrier the lines. You're technically a kitchen maid, but that doesn't stop you from cleaning chamber pots or feeding the hounds if someone else slacks off. Now comes the worst part of the morning, navigating the maze of servant hallways with a full tray. One wrong step and you're eating the master's breakfast yourself, off the floor just before you're dismissed. You hold the tray high and steady, tiptoe past the green baize door, more on that nightmare later, and ease up the narrow stairs. The heat from the kitchen clings to you like a curse, and your forehead is slick with sweat. You use your sleeve to dab at it, knowing full well that any smudge on the porcelain will be blamed on you. You reach the morning room just as Lady V, still in her dressing gown and furiously petting an overfed Pomeranian, rings her bell twice. Double ring means you're late. You aren't, but she's decided you are. The room smells like violets and too much rosewater. Sunlight spills through tall windows you're never allowed to touch, reflecting off polished surfaces you spent hours cleaning yesterday. She doesn't look up as you set the tray down. Her breakfast is a precise display. 2 slices of toast, 1 poached egg, 1 teacup of milk, not too hot, not too cold, and a sugar bowl with exactly 6 cubes. You've memorised it, of course. Your job depends on it. The dog yaps. You flinch. She snaps her fingers. "You," she says, "more jam." You nod and retreat, moving backward, never turning your back on her. Not because it's disrespectful, no, it's because she once threw a spoon at the undermaid for doing so. Here's a strange fact for you. In some households, servants weren't allowed to walk on the same staircase as the family. You had to flatten yourself against the wall or retreat entirely until the noble personage had passed. You, of course, live this rule daily. You know the squeak of every stair, the angle of every creaking board. You disappear like smoke when needed. Back in the kitchen, the cook is now in high gear. She's tossing pans and hurling insults at the scullery boy, who has somehow managed to burn porridge. Again, you avoid her eyes, grab the jam, and pray for a smooth delivery. This time she doesn't even look up when you place it on the table. She's feeding the dog a piece of ham and sipping her milk slightly too loudly. You exit and finally return to the scullery where a mountain of dishes awaits. The breakfast rush is over for them. For you, it's just transitioning. By 10 o'clock, you've been on your feet for 6 hours. No break, no tea, just the constant whirl of duties and fire and bells. Oh, and that pot of stew you started earlier? It's boiling over. You lunge for it, grab the handle, and hiss in pain as the metal scalds your palm. You drop it, only slightly, and manage to keep most of the contents inside. Your reward? Another blister and a shout from cook that the potatoes are crumbling like cheap morals. You're tired. You're hungry. And worst of all, you know this is just the morning shift. Lunch is next. Then tea. Then dinner. And then, maybe, if you've done everything perfectly and no one has yelled your name in the last half hour, you'll get 15 minutes to collapse in the larder and eat a crust of bread before polishing silver until your back gives out. And remember, you're the lucky one. You're not a coal boy or a mudlark. You live indoors, after all. Still, you eye the fire poker for a moment, wondering how many more days your body can take this. Then the bell rings again. Master's study. You sigh, grab your apron, and run. The bell in the master's study has a particularly smug little ring to it. You've learned to hate the different sounds they make. The morning room bell is sharp and impatient. The nursery bell has a sad, whiny jangle, like a ghost with no bedtime. But the study bell, oh, that one chimes like it knows you are just about to breathe. It tugs at your nerves like a violin played with a butter knife. You rush up the back stairs again, careful to avoid the one that creaks. The corridor leading to the study is always chilly, no matter the season. You can't help but notice how quiet it is up here, so peaceful compared to the boiling chaos downstairs. The master's world is lined with bookshelves, cigar smoke, and thick rugs that silence your footsteps. Everything smells like leather and pipe tobacco. You envy the carpet sometimes, nothing touches it too harshly. You knock, no answer. You knock again. Still nothing. But you hear the deep grumble of a chair shifting, so you open the door just wide enough to peek in. He's seated behind a grand mahogany desk, surrounded by paperwork that you suspect is mostly for show. He's not wearing his jacket yet. You've learned not to look directly at him, but out of the corner of your eye, you spot his cravat, loosely tied, and the tumbler of brandy that shouldn't be there before noon. "Where's the post?" he asks without looking at you. You freeze. No one gave you the letters. You haven't even seen the footman this hour, probably shaving his perfectly symmetrical face or polishing shoes while humming like he's the Duke of York. "I'll fetch it, sir," you whisper, already backing out. You run, really run down 2 flights of stairs, across the hall, past the kitchen, where cook yells, "You break something, you die with it," and into the butler's pantry. Mr. Stevens is polishing the silver tongs with the kind of care usually reserved for infants. You don't dare interrupt him, but you do, because you must. "The master requests the post," you say, eyes cast down. He raises a single eyebrow, then sighs like your mere existence pains him. He hands you 3 envelopes and a rolled newspaper. Tell him I'll speak with him at noon. You nod, grab the items, and rush back. You knock again, enter, hand him the letters. He doesn't thank you. He doesn't look up. You've been erased again. Back downstairs, you pause near the servants' hall to catch your breath. Someone left a slice of bread on the table. It's probably stale. Maybe even someone's leftover crust, but you eat it anyway. You're starving, and dinner isn't for another 8 hours. The bread is hard enough to chip a tooth. That's when the bell rings again. Another room, another errand. You're starting to hate that sound more than fire. But let's take a second to talk about that dreaded invention. The servant bell system. Sounds quaint now, right? A simple cord in each room attached to a small bell on a labelled board in the servants' quarters. But when you're living inside the system, it's like being part of a cruel machine. One where you are the gear that spins until it breaks. Fun fringe fact. In some grander houses, the bellboard had over 30 labelled bells, each connected by hidden copper wire routed through the walls. It was early electrical servitude, before anyone cared what kind of toll that took on the people running up and down 4 floors every hour. And get this, sometimes the cords weren't labelled with room names, but with servant names. So instead of calling for a footman, the master could call for you specifically. It meant there was no hiding. You were always known, always reachable, even in the few rare minutes you thought you could disappear. There's scholarly debate over whether this bell system actually increased efficiency, or just pushed people further into exhaustion. Some argue it was a necessary evil to run such large households. Others suggest it turned human beings into living tools, endlessly on standby with no right to silence. You don't care about the debate though. All you know is the bells are driving you slowly insane. You spend the next hour darting between rooms, polishing this, dusting that, laying out tea trays, refolding napkins because the pattern looked tired. Every minute is accounted for. Even your posture is being judged. The housekeeper once told you that if your spine curved like a question mark, it meant you were lying or lazy. You're still not sure which accusation was worse. At one point, the maid assigned to the nursery trips and spills milk down the steps. You grab a rag and help her mop it up. She's crying softly. Her wrists are shaking. You want to hug her, but you both know touching each other might be seen as conduct unbecoming. So you scrub beside her in silence. Then comes the worst moment of the day, the double bell. That means 2 masters want something at the same time, usually the study and the parlour. And you can't clone yourself, you pick one and pray, and it's the parlour this time. The lady of the house wants a cushion moved, just moved, slightly to the left. You shift it 3 inches and wait. She nods. Finally, she says. It was like sitting on a pile of rocks. No, thank you, not even a glance. You're a ghost again. You exit the room and brace for the fallout from not answering the study bell. You imagine the master glancing at his watch, muttering about lazy help, even though you were breaking yourself in half for the comfort of his wife's spine. And now you're sweating again. Your uniform clings to your back. You know you smell faintly of the scullery. You try not to breathe too deeply. You're terrified of being told to stand farther away because you resemble a stable boy. You retreat into the hallway, aching, barely upright, and somewhere in the shadows you hear the next bell chime. It's endless, a rhythm you'll never escape, like a heartbeat that's not yours but controls every moment of your life. You glance at the clock. It's only 11:30. The worst part isn't the exhaustion, it's the pecking order. The endless grinding machine of hierarchy that never lets you forget your place, even when you're doing the same work as someone above you, just with less praise and more yelling. Welcome to the social ladder below stairs, where every rung feels like it's been greased with lard and spite. You're a lower servant somewhere near the bottom of the pyramid. Kitchen maid, scullery maid, general maid. It barely matters. You don't get to wear the neat uniforms like the upper housemaids or the footmen. Your apron's always stained with whatever the cook was throwing this morning, and your sleeves smell faintly of boiled cabbage. You look tired. You are tired. You've been tired since Tuesday of last week, and it's currently Thursday, you think. Just above you is the housemaid, who doesn't speak much, but always walks like she owns the floorboards. She changes chamber pots with flair. Then there's the under-housemaid, slightly more polished, usually with better posture and whiter cuffs. You clean up after both of them when they get distracted. And above all of you is the housekeeper. She moves through the servants' wing like a queen dressed in black bombazine. She carries a giant keyring like it's a weapon, and knows exactly how much soap you used yesterday. Her eyebrows can wither a grown man, and she terrifies the kitchen maids even more than the cook does, which is saying something, considering the cook once broke a broom over a spilled pudding. Then come the male servants. Don't get too cosy with them, though. Flirting is a fireable offence, at least for you. For them, the butler will just slap them on the back and offer a cigar. The footmen are tall, polished, and just vain enough to check their reflections in the silver they're supposed to be polishing. The livery makes them look like royalty, but they're really just glorified furniture movers with impressive carves and better lighting. You once caught one of them staring at himself in a mirror and practicing bowing. For 20 minutes. Then there's the valet and the lady's maid, basically the personal servants of the master and mistress. They are like the high priests of the household cult. They whisper directly into the ears of power, and it shows. They glide through rooms, they drink tea from porcelain, they look at you the way cats look at moths, mildly intrigued but mostly annoyed. Finally, at the absolute summit of Mount Servitude, is the butler. Mr. Stevens, with his pocket watch, his wine cellar keys, and his deep voice that makes every sentence sound like a funeral reading. He never raises his voice. He doesn't have to. He can freeze a room with silence. You once saw a footman drop a tray just because the butler looked at him too long. Now here's the kicker. None of this hierarchy is official. There's no document nailed to the pantry wall that outlines the precise chain of command. It's all whispered rules, stiff collars, and passive-aggressive coughs in the hallway. But break those rules, accidentally touch the wrong tea set or call someone by the wrong title, you'll be peeling potatoes in disgrace for the next 3 weeks. Or worse, you'll be transferred to laundry duty, permanently. Here's a quirky fringe fact. Some households even had invisible staircases so the upper servants could avoid crossing paths with the lower ones. Servants dodging servants. It was like a social ballet choreographed by sadists. Now there's some academic disagreement over whether all houses were this rigid. Smaller middle-class homes were often more relaxed out of necessity. They didn't have 20 servants to assign specialised roles. But in the big aristocratic houses, the ones you've landed in, everything is strictly enforced. And it gets weirder. For example, mealtime for servants is its own cruel theatre. The order of who sits where is determined entirely by rank. You eat cold cuts while staring at the back of the butler's head. The lowest ranked servants sit closest to the door, so they can jump up and run if a bell rings. That's you, of course. You barely get 3 bites in before someone's demanding a shoehorn or a replacement cravat. Right now, you're peeling carrots in the kitchen, trying not to attract attention. Your goal is invisibility, but the cook is storming around like a hurricane in an apron, slamming pots and demanding butter that doesn't exist. The housemaid breezes in, claims she found the good tea towels, you wash them, and flounces back upstairs. The butler peeks in to remind the cook of a special guest arriving this evening. Code for everything must be perfect or someone dies. The pressure builds. Everyone tightens. Even the cat, a sour-faced tabby named Jasper, stalks the hallway like he's stressed. You're sweating into the carrot bucket when the scullery boy trips and spills soapy water all over the floor. The cook roars. You drop a knife in shock, it skids dangerously close to your foot. No one asks if you're alright. You mop, apologise and disappear. And this is the daily atmosphere. A boiling pot of rivalry, desperation, and stiff politeness. No one truly helps anyone else unless they can trade the favour for something later. If someone sneaks you an extra bread roll, it's only because they'll want you to cover for them during night watch next week. Everything is leverage. Everything is quiet calculation. The only moment of solidarity happens late at night, when the day's chaos has finally hushed and the older housemaid shares a bit of contraband tea. You sit on an overturned bucket in the back hallway, sipping in silence. No one speaks. There's nothing left to say, just tired eyes, blistered fingers, and the creak of the house, settling around you like a giant snoring beast. That peace lasts all of 5 minutes before the night bell rings. You toss the tea, you rise, you run, and you don't even know who called. Laundry day. Just the phrase sends a shiver down your spine, even though it's not actually any colder in the stone-walled wash house where you'll spend the next 10 hours. You've been dreading this all week. If the kitchen is a furnace and the upstairs is a minefield, then the laundry is where hope goes to wrinkle and die. You begin before sunrise, again. The wash house smells like lye, mildew and defeat. Your hands are already raw, but you pull on your apron, one of your less filthy ones, and tie a scarf around your hair. You're not here to be seen. You're here to wage war on filth. The first thing you do is boil water. Big iron cauldrons sit on blackened grates above flames you coax into life with smoke in your eyes and soot in your throat. The water hisses and spits like it knows what's coming. You feed it wood like offerings to an angry god. Once the water is bubbling, you drag in the linens, sheets, petticoats, napkins, underclothes. Oh, the underclothes. No one talks about it, but they're there. Rows of drawers and chemises from the lady of the house, all white, all delicate, all required to be returned in pristine condition. No yellowing, no damage, no judgment. Even though you're the one who knows she definitely has a digestive issue she's pretending not to have. You reach for the first batch, dump it into the steaming pot, and stir it with a wooden paddle taller than you. Every movement is slow, deliberate. You try not to inhale too much steam. It scalds your throat and leaves your face damp. It's not a bath, it's a punishment. While the whites are boiling, you start on the fine things, the lace collars, the silk handkerchiefs, the embroidered whatnots that serve no purpose except to impress other rich people. These can't be boiled. No, these need special soap, expensive soap. soap you're not allowed to use on yourself. You rub them gently on a glass washboard, fingers as aching, praying you don't tear anything. One rip in a hem and you'll be accused of sabotage. There's no insurance for poor servants, just scorn and docked wages. Here's a weird fringe fact. Some laundresses in Victorian England actually used urine, yes, actual pee, as a cleaning agent. It helped with stains and acted as a kind of bleach. You're relieved your household doesn't subscribe to that particular tradition, though the smell in here sometimes makes you wonder. The real misery sets in when it's time to ring. No ringer of in here, just your arms and a stubborn towel that refuses to give up its water. You twist and squeeze until your knuckles crack and your muscles tremble. Then you do it again, and again, and again. Outside, the sky is lightening. You've barely made a dent. The pile behind you looks unchanged. The pile in front of you is growing. It's as if the laundry breeds while you're not looking. You hear the first bell of the morning ring distantly, somewhere beyond the trees in the courtyard, but you don't get to answer it. Today you're chained to the soap and steam. You pause for a moment, stretching your aching back. A fellow laundress, Annie, passes you a tin mug with water. You thank her. She doesn't smile. You both know this isn't friendship. It's triage. Some historians argue about just how dangerous laundry duty really was. They say servants exaggerated, that laundry was no worse than fieldwork or factory labour. But those people never spent an entire winter's day outside, fingers wet and stiff with cold, trying to pin sheets on a line with the wind trying to rip them from your grasp. They never heard the crack of linen snapping in frozen air or felt the cold climb into their boots and settle behind their knees like it belonged there. The drying yard is muddy from last week's rain. Your shoes squelch. Your petticoats soak through at the hem. You drape the linens one by one, careful not to overlap, careful not to drag them in the dirt, careful not to collapse face first into the gravel. The ladies' lace gloves flutter in the breeze like little ghost hands waving mockingly at you. And of course, once the laundry is dry, it's not done. Oh no, now it must be pressed. Ironing means heating heavy cast iron monstrosities over hot coals and praying the handle doesn't burn your skin. You test it with a drop of water, hear the sizzle, and get to work. Each shirt must be crisp, each petticoat smooth, each tablecloth so flat it could be used as a mirror in a pinch. Your arm cramps as you iron a pleated skirt. Your shoulder twinges. You press on, literally. You think about asking the cook if she has anything for pain, but you already know what she'll say. You're too young to be tired. Around midday, the housekeeper checks in. She doesn't enter the wash house, God forbid, but she pokes her head through the door, sniffs, and asks whether the mistress's lace nightgown is ready. Yes, ma'am, you say, handing it over carefully. She inspects it, finds a single loose thread. Do better, she says, and disappears. You want to scream, you don't. Instead, you grab the next pile and keep going. There's no lunch break, just some hard bread left out on a chipped plate and a half-empty pot of weak tea that tastes like despair. You dunk the bread, you chew, you pretend it doesn't feel like swallowing gravel. You return to folding. Folding means precision. Everything must be exact, edges aligned, corners crisp, stacks symmetrical. You blink hard against the sting in your eyes. The smoke from the earlier fire still lingers, coating your lungs in ash. In the corner, Annie sneezes, and it sounds like the start of something worse. You glance at her, face flushed, eyes watery. She's getting sick. She can't afford to. Neither can you. By sunset, your hands look twice your age. Your fingernails are shredded. The skin on your knuckles has split. You carry the final load of linens up to the linen press, moving slowly, every step deliberate, as if you're walking on broken glass. You slide the ironed sheets onto the wooden shelves, arrange the towels just right, and close the door quietly. No one thanks you. No one sees you. But if one crease is found tomorrow, it'll be your fault. You return to the scullery, where the other maids are starting on dinner prep. You don't join them yet. You sink onto a wooden stool for 60 seconds. Just 60. You listen to the crackle of the fire and the distant clatter of silverware upstairs. Somewhere a bell rings. You wait for someone else to answer it. No one does. You rise. You didn't think it was possible. But tonight's task is somehow even more soul-numbing than yesterday's 12-hour stint in the wash house. You're in the main hallway now, armed with a cloth, a bottle of polish that smells like vinegar and ruin, and a firm reminder from the housekeeper. I want to see my face in every surface. She meant it literally. She checks. You've seen her lean down, nose to the brass, inspecting door hinges like she's the queen of clean. The target of your affection tonight? The doorknobs, dozens of them. One for every room, closet and pointless guest chamber no one's slept in for 3 years. They're all tarnished, of course. It's your job to make them shine, without scratching, without missing a single smudge, and without being caught making a face about it. Which is harder than it sounds, because you're definitely making a face. You start on the front door. It's huge, dark oak iron bolts and a brass handle the size of your fist. The polish seeps into your cracked fingers, and the cloth immediately blackens with grime. You scrub in circles over and over, until the shine comes through like a star fighting its way out of fog. You lean back, squinting. Not bad, but not good enough. You lean in again and scrub harder. Your wrist protests. You ignore it. There's a strange comfort in the repetition. Scrub, breathe, shift, repeat. It's mindless, which you secretly prefer. Thinking leads to questions, and questions lead to trouble. Questions like, why am I polishing something no one touches? Or, what if I just didn't? By knob number 7, you've lost feeling in your right thumb. You've also memorised the exact creak of every hinge in the hallway. You know the slight warp in the panelling near the dining room. You know the place where the master's dog once chewed the baseboard and got away with it. You're becoming one with the woodwork. Here's a strange fringe fact for you. In some high-end Victorian households, servants had to polish silver door plates multiple times a day, even if no one had come or gone, because tarnish was considered a moral failing. If your brass was dull, so was your character. There's an unspoken hierarchy even among the inanimate objects in this house. The silver gets the best polish. The brass gets the middle-tier stuff. The pewter gets a sigh and whatever's left. You, obviously, get nothing. Some historians say the obsession with cleaning and polish in these houses was tied directly to Victorian anxiety about respectability. There was a moral edge to cleanliness. A shiny doorknob wasn't just a shiny doorknob. It was proof that the household was proper, disciplined, and thriving. As if a guest might look around and say, "Ah, yes, clearly a good family. Their coat hooks gleam." You polish on, knob after knob, hinge after hinge. The smell starts to stick to your clothes. The cloth you're using is now a murky brown, but you don't dare change it until the entire hallway is done. Waste not, want not, or in your case, waste and get a lecture from the butler about discipline. You catch your reflection in one of the shinier knobs and immediately wish you hadn't. Your hair is flat, your face is pale, there's a streak of soot on your temple you didn't notice before. You look like the ghost of failed ambition. That's when you hear it. Footsteps on the stairs. Not the heavy, self-important tread of the master. Not the light, floaty trip of the lady. No, this is the butler. Mr. Stevens. Walking slowly, rhythmically, like a metronome made of judgment. He pauses behind you. "You missed one," he says, voice smooth as the silverware he guards like a dragon. You flinch, then immediately bend to polish again. He doesn't leave. You polish harder. Finally, he turns and glides away without another word. You exhale. You don't cry, not here, not over a doorknob. You move on to the brass candlestick holders next. They've already been cleaned yesterday. But apparently there's a dinner guest coming, a cousin of the lady who always smells like lavender and snobbery, so everything must be perfect. You polish the same curves and ridges over and over, wondering who designs these things. Someone who hates maids, surely. Someone who thinks intricate grooves and ridiculous lion head handles make their home look fancy, not maddening. One of the upper housemaids walks by and gives you a pitying glance. She's carrying folded napkins for the table. You envy her slightly. Not for the work, folding napkins is tedious, but for the proximity to something soft. You haven't touched anything gentle all day. Eventually the hallway is gleaming. You know this because you can see your distorted reflection in every knob and plate like a haunted house mirror gallery. You start to straighten up carefully because your spine has locked into a question mark, and make your way to the staircase. More brass rails to polish. Each step has a bracket. Each bracket is filthy. You pause at the landing and stretch. Your shoulders crack audibly. You tell yourself it's a good sound. It means you're still functioning. Here's the thing no one tells you about this job. Half your labour is invisible. No guest ever walks into the front hall and says, "What beautifully polished baseboards." No one applauds your meticulous attention to the spindles on the banister. They only notice if you miss one, which means you live in a world of invisible victories and very visible failures. You continue. By the time you finish, it's nearly time to set the dining room. You drag your bucket and cloth back to the scullery, rinse them out and wash your hands. The skin on your fingers is tight, tingling, raw. You splash cool water on your face and ignore the sting in your eyes. In the servants' hall, you overhear the kitchen maid whispering that the visiting cousin is staying for 3 days. That means 3 days of extra place settings, extra sheets, extra drama. You nod silently. You know what's coming. More work, more polish, more rules. But at least for now, the doorknobs are gleaming. You did that. You take no pride in it. You take no credit. But you did it. And now, there's a bell ringing from the drawing room. Of course there is. You'd hope the drawing room bell meant tea, or maybe a fire needing stoking, something straightforward. But no, tonight, it's worse. Much worse. You're being summoned to deal with one of the master's private matters, which is always a tangled, delicate mess soaked in secrecy and just a touch of horror. You approach the door like it might open and swallow you whole. You knock once, quietly. There's no response, just the muted rustle of fabric and the creak of an armchair, shifting. You knock again, firmer. "Enter," comes the reply, sharp, clipped and familiar. You push the door open, eyes fixed on the floor as expected. The master is standing by the fireplace, his cravat loose, his waistcoat unbuttoned, which is already too much information for you. A woman sits in the corner. She's not the lady of the house. You don't look at her. You know the rules. She has thick ringlets, smudged lipstick, and a perfume so sweet it makes your throat close. She's adjusting her stocking when you enter. You try not to see her. "Clean this up," the master says, not turning to face you. You nod, step forward, and see the mess. A shattered glass, a splash of something red, wine, you hope, and a trail of silk ribbon leading halfway under the chaise lounge. You gather it all silently. The woman giggles. The master says nothing. It's worse than yelling. You sweep the glass into your apron and blot the carpet with a rag. The wine is soaking into the brocade rug, the one from Italy, the one you weren't even allowed to vacuum without supervision last month. You dab carefully, aware that if a single stain remains, you'll be accused of sabotaging family heirlooms. The woman hums a tune. You recognise it. It was sung by one of the parlour maids last month before she vanished without explanation. The master finally speaks again, his tone casual. "Leave the windows open for a while. It's stuffy in here." You don't respond. You don't make eye contact. You simply nod again and leave, clutching the wine-soaked rag and the ribbon in your apron like damning evidence. In the hallway you breathe for the first time in minutes. The air is stale, thick with tobacco and rosewater and shame. You exhale slowly. It's not your business. It's never your business. But still, here's the unspeakable truth that pulses beneath every gilded cornice and marble fireplace. You, the servant, are the keeper of the house's secrets. You know what the guests don't. You know who sneaks down the back stairs at night, who leaves their corsets hanging on the bedpost, who drinks in the library after midnight, and who has a fondness for companions not listed in any marriage certificate. And you clean it up. All of it. Blood, lipstick, broken glass, tears. It's your job to restore the illusion. Your reward? Silence. If you speak, you're gone. No reference, no job, possibly worse. There's scholarly debate, of course. Some historians argue that Victorian households maintained firm moral discipline, especially among the aristocracy. Others, perhaps less starry-eyed, point out that these grand houses were often dens of hypocrisy, where wealth and power cloaked a constant churn of scandal, affairs, and inconvenient pregnancies swept under imported rugs. Fringe fact? In more than a few households, the lady's maid or scullery maid would vanish mysteriously for several months, only to return thinner, quieter, and with slightly different duties. Sometimes it was a visit to family, other times it was a stint in a hidden cottage where a baby would be born and placed elsewhere. You've seen it happen, not just once. Back in the scullery, you empty your apron. The ribbon gets stuffed into the kindling box. The rag goes in the boiling pot with the rest of the stained linens. You pour water over the apron itself, scrubbing at the wine stain like your own life depends on it, because it does. Then comes another task. This one less scandalous, more grotesque. One of the chamber pots from the guest room needs emptying. Of course it does. You draw the short straw because the undermaid conveniently remembered she had a sewing chore she simply must get to. So up you go again, this time with a pale and a practised expression of blank disinterest. You've become strangely immune to chamber pot duty. The first few times were traumatic. Now it's just Wednesday. You hold your breath, pour carefully, and clean the porcelain with practised efficiency. But this guest must have been suffering something awful. You suppress a gag and silently curse beef stew. And here's the sick twist. You're grateful no one else had to see this. Because even among servants, there's a kind of pride in suffering silently. You're stronger if you can clean vomit with a steady hand. You're reliable if you can keep your face straight while removing stains from a man's trousers that definitely aren't mud. It's dark now. The house glows with candlelight and gas lamps. Dinner is being served upstairs. You hear laughter, the clink of forks, the tinkle of a piano from the drawing room. All of it filtered through the thick barrier of class and walls and expectation. You're not supposed to even notice, but you do. As the night stretches on, you pass the green baize door again, the one that separates the servants' world from the family's. It swings open for a second. You glimpse a guest twirling a glass of wine, laughing as he wipes his mouth with a linen napkin you ironed this morning. He doesn't see you. He doesn't know you exist. And for a moment you don't want to. The last task of the night is to deliver clean linens to the guest rooms. You walk quietly, placing folded towels and neatly ironed sheets at the foot of each bed. One room smells strongly of lavender and gin. Another is suspiciously warm, like someone's still inside, though you were told they went out. You don't knock, you don't pause. You place the linen and go. You're back in the attic by midnight. The other girls are asleep. You don't bother lighting a candle. You take off your apron, lie down in your clothes, and stare at the ceiling, listening to the slow drip of rain on the slate roof. You feel a tremor in your legs from walking up and down the stairs 100 times today. Your arms still smell faintly of polish. Your mind replays the ribbon, the giggle, the master's voice, but you say nothing, you sleep anyway, because tomorrow someone will need you to erase them again. You wake up with the stink of ammonia in your nose and something damp soaking through your petticoat. No surprise, it's chamber pot day. Again. And someone upstairs clearly had too much of something rich and regrettable for dinner. The scent seeps into the floorboards, climbs the stairs, and punches you awake before the sun even tries to help. You sit up slowly, body stiff like you've been rolled up and stored in a cupboard overnight. Your fellow maids are already gone, their beds cold and empty. You missed the first call of the day. Not a good sign. You throw on your dress, grab your apron, and dash downstairs without lacing your boots, trying to keep your hair from springing out of its pins. Down below, the house is just beginning to stir. Up above, the first bell of the morning rings, a low, grumpy jingle that means the master has decided to exist again. But your first job today is filthier than yesterday's secrets. You've been assigned to the chamber pot rounds. Let's just be clear, Victorians had an impressive ability to pretend their lives were elegant while doing things in buckets under their beds, and it's your job to deal with that. Dozens of ceramic vessels, most with floral patterns to disguise the horror within. You carry 2 at a time, one in each hand, arms held straight out to avoid sloshing. You've learned how to walk like a tightrope performer. The stakes are higher than a circus fall. If you spill one of these on the carpet, you might as well pack your things and throw yourself into the Thames. You make it to the sluice room, a dark, barely ventilated box tucked away behind the scullery. The smell hits you like a slap. Always does, no matter how many times you do this. You dump the contents, scrubbing the porcelain afterward with a stiff brush and boiling water. There are no gloves. Your fingers go raw. You think you find something alive in one of the pots. You don't look closely. Here's your fringe fact. Not all chamber pots were simple buckets. Some were ornate, with silver trims and even music boxes built into the lids to drown out the acoustics. You, of course, get the cracked ones, the ones with worn-out handles and a chipped rim that gives you a new cut every week. And don't get any ideas about being done quickly. No, the family had guests last night, which means extra pots, extra fluids. One of them must be on some special tonic, because their offering smells like old eggs and horror. You gag quietly. You've become a master of silent nausea. There's a debate, of course there is, about whether servants truly had to do this every day or whether it was rotated. Some historians think this duty was passed around to keep one person from going mad. But you know how it works in your house. If you're good at something, it becomes yours forever. You made the mistake of being efficient on chamber pot duty last week, so now it's you every time until the end of the days or until someone else drops a pot and gets reassigned. You scrub, You rinse, you stack the clean ones with mechanical precision. The floors are slick with something, hopefully just water, and your boots slide as you haul the last of the loads back up the stairs. You place each pot back under the bed where it belongs, wondering if the people sleeping above you know or care that a girl with bleeding knuckles and sore arms has just sanitized their porcelain toilet. And the worst part? It's not the smell, it's not the stains, it's the silence. The absolute brutal lack of acknowledgement. You've spent the last 2 hours removing human waste from floral pots with gold rims, and when you step back into the hallway, the butler walks past you like you're a particularly offensive patch of wallpaper. You go to wash your hands again. The cold tap in the scullery drips unevenly, like it's judging you. You scrub with soap until your hands sting. There's still something under your nails. You give up. Then cook yells. You flinch. It's time for the breakfast rush and the bacon's burning because the scullery boy, predictably, is late and already whimpering over something. You leap in, slicing bread, stirring porridge, passing plates. You're not technically kitchen staff today, but that doesn't matter. When chaos strikes, you become whatever the house needs. Maid, cook, nurse, furniture. No one asks. The smell of grease mingles with the last whiff of the sluice room still clinging to your hair. You catch your reflection in the copper pot lid and nearly laugh. Your face is pale, your eyes tired, your apron stained, and your entire body smells like a contradiction. Upstairs, the master is reading the paper, sipping tea you brewed in a dressing gown you ironed, while sitting on a chair you dusted, with a view through windows you cleaned. He will not think of you today. You're finally allowed a 5-minute break after breakfast. You sit on a crate in the passageway by the back stairs. You hold a crust of bread in one hand and a chipped tin mug of weak tea in the other. The bread is hard, the tea is colder than you are. You eat anyway. The senior housemaid joins you for a moment. She's older, maybe 35, though the lines around her eyes make her seem ancient. She lights a match off the wall and offers you the spent warmth. You both sit in silence, the way soldiers do after a lost battle. She says, "It's never really clean, is it?" You shake your head. She's not talking about the chamber pots anymore. Back on duty, you're assigned to scrub the stair rails again, the ones near the guest bedrooms. You work in silence, cloth in one hand, polish in the other. As you scrub, you hear laughter upstairs, a man's laugh, a woman's giggle, then silence. Then the door closes. You don't react. The rail gleams. You keep polishing. Later that afternoon, you carry tea up to the lady's sitting room. She doesn't look at you. She's writing a letter. You place the tray on her table. As you turn to leave, she says, without looking up, "The linen in the blue guest room smelled odd. See to it." You nod. You don't mention that you just spent 2 hours boiling sheets that belong to her cousin, the one who threw up into a silk slipper last night. You don't mention the lavender sachet you tucked in to mask the scent. You don't mention anything. You simply nod and leave. And on your way back down, you pass the green baize door again. Always that door. Always the reminder that you are just a breath apart from lives you'll never touch but forever clean up after. You don't cry, you just move on to the next room, and hope it doesn't involve more mystery fluids. You're halfway through folding the linens again. Yes, the same ones from the guest room that were allegedly offensive to Lady V's delicate nose. When you catch a glimpse of something that momentarily lifts your eyes from the starch and folds. The drawing room door swings open for a breathless second. There, under golden candlelight and a chandelier dripping with crystal, stands a woman in a silk gown the colour of crushed roses. She laughs, tipping her head back, her throat glinting with pearls. Behind her, a young man plays the piano like it's his second language. It's perfect, it's surreal, it's untouchable. You freeze, cloth in hand, watching from just behind the green baize door, the one servants aren't supposed to linger near, let alone peer through. The door itself is a symbol, painted to blend with the shadows and trimmed to ensure it stays visually insignificant. A barrier, a dividing line. On one side, music, laughter, chandeliers. On the other, you. You weren't meant to see any of this, supervisions. If you're caught, you'll be scolded, again, for forgetting your station. But you can't help it. Moments like these are the flickers of another life, one you'll never touch but sometimes fantasize about during the quietest part of laundry day, when the heat is numbing and your mind wanders. You like to imagine what it might feel like to be a guest here, to wear a dress you didn't sew yourself to smell like violets instead of lye, to eat cake without clearing the crumbs afterward. But that world isn't yours. You retreat quickly, the door closing behind you with a polite click that feels more final than a slammed gate. Back in the servants' hallway, the contrast is stark. No chandeliers here, just gas lamps that flicker, like they might give up at any second. The air smells faintly of cabbage and old stone. Your boots squish slightly on the damp floor. Everything is the same as always, but now, after seeing the other side again, it all feels just a little more unbearable. Here's a fringe detail you don't hear much about. Servants were often trained to walk silently, especially when crossing near rooms where the family might hear them. You were taught early, heel toe, like a cat, except cats aren't also carrying full trays of porcelain or buckets of ash. As you walk back toward the servants' hall, your eyes instinctively glance upward. There's a mirror at the landing on the first floor, a gift from some long-dead uncle, imported from France. You're not supposed to look at it, of course, but you do. You always do. It shows a distorted version of the house. Sweeping staircase, gold-tipped banisters, wall panels carved with grapes and hunting scenes. Sometimes, if you position yourself just right, you can see yourself inside that world for a few seconds. Tonight, you look and catch your reflection in full. A girl with a crooked apron, a smudge on her cheek, eyes ringed with the kind of purple no amount of rest will fix. You stare. The mirror doesn't blink. You step away. There's a scholarly debate about whether servants longed for upward mobility or simply survival. Some argue that domestic service was viewed as a respectable profession, structured, steady, offering room and board. Others, with perhaps more candour, call it a slow death in a tidy uniform. You personally have no opinion. Or rather, your opinion is the same as your breakfast. Plain, cold, and swallowed without comment. Tonight's dinner service is one of the more formal ones. The visiting cousin is still here, 2 days into his stay and already drinking the house dry. He likes to make loud, amusing comments about the help within earshot, assuming none of you speak full English or have working ears. At yesterday's dinner, he tried to guess the kitchen maid's age based on how bow-legged she looked. You didn't laugh, neither did she. You're on tea duty. Simple work, but stressful. You must deliver the tray without sound, the cups must be placed in the correct orientation, handles facing right, sugar at the hostess's elbow. And the milk must be neither too hot nor too cold. There was a tea disaster last year. A scullery girl served it lukewarm and was sent packing that very evening. No reference. Gone. You carry the tray carefully. Every clink feels like an accusation. The hallway outside the dining room is polished so brightly it reflects your shoes. You hope you remembered to wipe them. You step inside, place the tray and retreat. No one looks up. No one thanks you. Back downstairs, the underfootman is snoring in the chair near the wine cellar. The cook passes by, smacks him on the shoulder with a ladle, and keeps walking. He startles upright, eyes wide, then slumps again. He's younger than you, and looks twice as broken. It's nearly 9 p.m. now, and you haven't eaten since midday. Dinner for servants is served late after the family finishes and the dishes are cleaned. Tonight it's thin stew and stale bread. You eat quickly, seated on a hard bench in the servants' hall, elbows close, conversation minimal. No one wants to talk, you're all saving your energy for the evening rounds. You're sent to check the drawing room fire. This requires slipping in silently, adding coal without making sparks and escaping unseen. It's risky. The cousin is still there, wineglass in hand, legs crossed like he owns every chair in Britain. As you enter, he turns. "Ah," he says, "the coal fairy." You say nothing. You crouch, add 3 lumps, brush the hearth. He watches you. You want to disappear. He chuckles, swirling his glass. Do you ever speak, little shadow? You rise, back still turned, and walk out. You hear him laugh again as the door closes. Here's your historical fact for the night. Victorian homes were often built with hidden servant passageways, narrow and twisting, allowing you to travel the entire house without being seen. You live in those paths, you exist in the walls, you move like breath through a mansion's lungs, never noticed, always essential. The night ends, as they all do, with a check of the drawing rooms, a last sweep of the hallway, and a weary trudge up the servant stairs. Your legs ache, your feet throb, your arms still smell faintly of polish and smoke. You crawl into bed without changing, too tired to care. The ceiling stares back. Rain starts again, soft and steady on the roof, tapping out a rhythm older than you, older than this house. You close your eyes. On the other side of the green baize door, someone laughs. It's Sunday morning, which you might think offers a reprieve. A tiny breath of fresh air, perhaps? A moment to rest? Maybe a half day off to sit in a sunbeam and read a borrowed novel with a tear in the cover? No. It's still work, it's just work in different clothes. Today you're not in your usual apron and plain cotton dress. No, today you've squeezed into your Sunday best, which is really just a slightly less worn version of your regular uniform, with tighter sleeves, shoes that pinch, and an awkward bonnet that makes you look like you've just escaped from a watercolour painting. Everything itches. The collar digs into your throat like a moral warning. Your boots squeak with each step as if protesting the whole charade. The first task of Sunday is getting everyone else ready for their Sabbath, which means helping the upstairs maids prep the ladies' wardrobe. Layers of petticoats, delicate gloves, and bonnets trimmed with the feathers of birds that probably went extinct for fashion's sake. The master wears black, of course, like he's attending his own funeral, and the children are scrubbed and starched until they look like dolls who've never had a single rebellious thought. And what do you get? Church duty. But not as a worshipper. Not really. You're going because the housekeeper says it keeps the staff morally upright. You attend the family's designated chapel with the other lower servants. You sit in the back behind the stone column with the chipped angel that blocks most of the altar. The only time you see daylight is through stained glass, and even that's distorted. Here's a strange little fringe fact. Some servants were required to memorize hymns and recite the 10 Commandments weekly, just to prove they were respectable. As if remembering "thou shalt not covet" somehow made your 10-hour shift in the washhouse more virtuous. Church lasts a full hour, and most of it's spent trying to keep your eyes open while perched on a splintery pew next to the scullery boy, who smells like turnip water and wet socks. The priest speaks of divine order, of everyone knowing their place, of the virtue of labour. You try not to laugh or cry, your stomach growls and someone behind you sighs. Heaven, if it exists, surely smells better than this. But back at the house, the real irony kicks in. Sunday is the lady's favourite day for guests, which means your afternoon is packed. You'd think the Sabbath might inspire her to rest, or at least fake a headache and retire early. But no. The drawing room needs flowers, the porcelain tea service must be spotless, and every cushion must be fluffed within an inch of its life. The worst part, the Sunday roast. It's a production on par with a royal banquet. Cook starts the meat early, and by noon the whole kitchen is a roasting, boiling, hissing beast of heat and shouting. You're handed a knife and told to prepare the carrots. You slice until your fingers go numb, then it's the turnips, then the peas. By the time you're done, your apron is dotted with vegetable shrapnel, and your back feels like it's been folded in half. Lunch for the servants is a rushed affair, some dripping lace scraps of roast and a dry wedge of bread if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you're still working while everyone else eats. You chew quickly standing, then run upstairs to assist with setting the tea table. And here's where Sunday really stings. Your break comes in the form of enforced mending. Yes, that dress with the ripped seam from 2 weeks ago, that's your responsibility. So is the footman's fraying sleeve and the laundrymaid's torn apron. You sit in the servants' hall with a needle, squinting under flickering gaslight, stitching like your life depends on it. Which, to be fair, it kinda does. If you're caught skipping your mending duties, the housekeeper will ask whether your time might be better spent finding new employment. The parlour bell rings. You go. It's a guest requesting a different cushion. Again. The third one today, you're beginning to think this woman has a personal vendetta against upholstery. You nod, fetch another from the linen closet, and return just in time to be ignored completely. She lifts her feet while you switch out the cushions, then drops them with a sigh, as though your hands are made of air. You wonder, briefly, what it would feel like to drop a cushion directly on her lap. Hard, like a fluffy rebellion, but you don't. Of course you don't. Scholars still debate how much free time servants actually had on Sundays. Some claim the afternoons were meant for leisure, even outings. Others say it was an illusion. Breaks disguised as chores, rest that came with an apron. Your own experience makes the answer pretty clear. Sunday is just Monday with more starch and fewer potatoes. Evening approaches, and the house settles into its usual rhythm. The guests leave. The cousin makes one last obnoxious joke about the wine. The lady yawns delicately. The master retires with his decanter, and the rest of you clean it all up. You're sweeping the front hall now, the stiff brush grating over tiles that haven't really been dirty since yesterday, but still require freshening. The butler inspects the silver near the entryway. The housekeeper walks by, her skirt swishing ominously. She nods once. It means good, but not too good. Don't get smug. It's nearly 9 p.m. again, and you're aching. Your boots pinch harder now, the inside's worn to the stitching. The tight Sunday collar has left a faint red ring around your neck. You change back into your everyday uniform, which somehow feels softer, less like a costume, less like a lie. You retreat to the kitchen for a final chore, prepping for Monday. The week begins again in just a few hours. You lay out the cloths, check the soap, refill the polishing oil. You do all of this while thinking about nothing because it's the only way to survive. Then you climb the stairs one last time, slow and careful. The girls are already in bed. The room is quiet, dark and filled with the soft sound of breathing. You wash your hands in the little basin near your bed. The water is cold and smells faintly of iron. Your fingers are still pricked from mending. Your palms smell like carrots and lye. You crawl into bed. The blanket is scratchy, but it's yours. You pull it to your chin and stare at the ceiling. Somewhere the church bell rings in the distance, marking the end of the Sabbath. And all you can think is, thank God that's over. There are days when the work feels mechanical, your body going through motions so familiar they don't even register as choices anymore. But today, it feels personal. Because today, it seems everyone is watching you. Not just watching, but evaluating, dissecting, silently noting every movement, every blink, every fraction of a mistake. You're not sure why. Maybe you've made someone angry without realizing it. Maybe the house is just in one of its moods, but the eyes are everywhere today, and your nerves are fried before breakfast. It starts with the butler, of course. Mr. Stevens looms at the top of the service stairs while you're arranging the boot tray, arms folded, lips pursed like he's trying not to be disgusted by your existence. You're aligning the shoes exactly as he taught, heels flush, toes forward, but still he hums that little that sounds like a knife being sharpened. You can feel his eyes boring into the back of your head as you work, like a schoolmaster waiting for you to sneeze during scripture reading. Next comes the housekeeper. She appears in the linen press just as you're folding towels, her favourite ambush spot. She says nothing at first, just watches from the doorway, with the look of a woman about to subtract a penny from your wages for breathing too loud. Then she steps forward, plucks a towel from your perfectly stacked pile, and refolds it. Edges must be sharp, she says coolly. She refolds 3 more, hands them back, and walks away. You want to scream. Instead, you keep folding. Upstairs, while delivering fresh towels to the blue guest room, the same one you relaundered twice last week, you catch the lady of the house glancing at you over her morning paper. She doesn't speak, but you feel it. That pause, that flick of her eyes, a silent assessment, as if she's wondering whether your posture has slipped, or if your expression seems too human. You keep your face neutral. Pleasant, but not too pleasant. Helpful, but not eager. You've learned to aim for invisibility with edges. It's a special kind of torture, this performance. Because everything about your job depends not just on doing the work, but doing it with the right attitude. You can scrub a floor until it gleams like a mirror, but if you do it with clenched teeth or a little too much speed, someone will accuse you of rushing, or worse, resentment. There's a fringe fact that might make you groan. Some Victorian employers kept little notebooks to record servant behaviour. Yes, actual ledgers filled with notes like Mary seemed sullen at supper, or Annie's lace was untidy. These would be referenced when deciding who got recommendations, or who mysteriously ended up let go. You wonder sometimes what your page looks like in that invisible book. After breakfast, the real parade begins. Everyone in the household seems to need something from you. The footman can't find the silver-handled brush. The valet wants extra starch in the master's cravat. The kitchen maid asked you to carry a tray because she hurt her wrist. And every one of them watches you as you do it, gauging your speed, your silence, your posture, your compliance. You feel less like a person and more like a product on trial. There's no privacy, even among the servants. You share a room, a hall, your staircase. You dress and undress, surrounded by the eyes of girls who've learned to keep scoring glances and whispered critiques. Everyone's watching everyone else, because no one wants to be the one who slips. You know that if you trip on the stairs or leave a smudge on the mirror, word will travel faster than fire in the laundry room. And yet the hierarchy protects some and exposes others. You, for instance, can be corrected for forgetting to knock before entering a room, but the footman, he can make a lewd comment in the scullery and still be considered charming. You overhear one of the ladies' maids complaining to the housekeeper that you didn't curtsy deeply enough. She didn't even look at you when she said it. You make a note to curtsy next time, like your knees are made of prayer, and there's scholarly debate about how much surveillance really existed in Victorian homes. Some say it was oppressive and constant. Others argue that it was more about internalised discipline, servants learning to monitor themselves. From your perspective, it's both. You live under 1,000 silent rules, enforced not just by your superiors, but by your own fear of being noticed in the wrong way. Even the house itself feels like it's watching. The mirrors reflect your fatigue. The tall, echoing halls magnify the sound of your missteps. The walls seem to close in slightly whenever the mistress is in a foul mood. And today, she's in a foul mood. Her voice carries down the corridor as she scolds her lady's maid for something trivial, probably a hairpin placed 2 inches too far to the left. You hear every word, and you flinch on behalf of the girl, even though she's technically above you in the servant pyramid. By mid-afternoon, your nerves are strung tight. You've smiled at everyone. You've apologised for things that weren't your fault. You've redone your folding twice. You've checked and rechecked every bell pull in the guest wing. Still, you can feel it. That sense of being watched, weighed, judged. Then comes the final straw, a misplaced cloth in the drawing room. You'd set it there while dusting, meaning to return to it. But the bell rang and you rushed away. Now it's been spotted. The lady of the house holds it delicately between 2 fingers like it's a dead bird. "Whose is this?" she asks, turning to the butler. He looks to you. "It was mine, madame," you say quickly, stepping forward. "Apologies. I meant to return for it." She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't have to. "I expect better," she says, then drops the cloth onto the side table as if it might bite. You collect it silently, curtsy, and retreat. Downstairs, the other maids avoid your eyes. No one says anything. The judgment isn't verbal, it's atmospheric. You sit on a crate in the scullery for 30 seconds, head in hands, before someone tells you the drawing room fire needs tending again. Of course it does. You go, because someone's always watching, and you can't afford to be seen slipping. It starts with the collar, always the collar, starched so stiff it could double as body armour. Pressed so sharply it feels like it might slice your neck open if you breathe wrong. You hate it. You hate the whole uniform today. The bodice pinches, the sleeves are too tight around the shoulders, your hem catches every stair you climb. You're a walking blister wrapped in itchy cotton and propriety, and there's no changing out of it until well after nightfall. Today you're on formal duty, which means looking presentable. And by presentable, they mean invisible but immaculate. Like a doily no one notices unless there's a wrinkle in it. You're expected to blend into the wallpaper but still somehow radiate dignity and obedience, and the faint suggestion of floral freshness. You check your reflection in the scullery's cracked mirror. Your hair's pinned neatly, no strands loose. Apron's clean, though your hands are already inked with polish residue from earlier. You scrub at them with a cloth, even though it stings. Presentation matters. More than comfort. More than blood circulation. The uniforms are a trap, really. Meant to make you look proper and upright, but built with the structural integrity of a corset made of tree bark. The fabric is unyielding, the buttons too high, the seams stitched tight as secrets. Your stockings itch. Your shoes are stiff enough to turn a walk across the hallway into a kind of medieval foot torture. And forget about weather accommodations. Summer? You sweat buckets and are told not to look shiny. Winter? You freeze inside layers that might as well be paper for all the warmth they provide. Heaven help you if you ask for thicker socks, you'll get a lecture about economy and be told to move faster to stay warm. There's a strange little fringe fact about Victorian uniforms. In many houses, you weren't even allowed to wash your own clothing. You had to hand it over to the laundry maids and hope they didn't gossip about the state of your underthings, and if your uniform went missing or came back ruined, still your fault, always your fault. You make your way upstairs, smoothing the skirt of your uniform every 3rd step, mostly out of habit, but also because there's a new guest in the house. A baroness, allegedly. She arrived yesterday in a cloud of perfume and disdain, bringing 3 trunks, a tiny dog, and an assistant who cries silently into her handkerchief when she thinks no one's watching. This morning, the Baroness is demanding hot chocolate at 11. Not tea, not coffee, hot chocolate. In August, you're the one assigned to deliver it. Cook's already complained twice. The butler raised an eyebrow so sharp it nearly sliced a cucumber. But no one questions it. She's a guest. Guests get what they want. You carry the tray slowly, carefully. The porcelain is delicate. The chocolate too full. One bump and it'll splash. One stain on the uniform and you'll be sent back downstairs to change. wasting time and proving you're unsuited to front-of-house tasks. You reach the drawing room and pause. Deep breath, knock twice. Wait. You hear the dog bark, then a disinterested, "Come." You enter, spine straight, face neutral like a mannequin that happens to have nerves. She doesn't look at you. Of course not. She's adjusting the dog's velvet ribbon. You place the tray exactly where instructed and step back. The dog snarls. You flinch. "Too much cream," she says without tasting it. You nod. "Shall I fetch another, madame?" "No, just take this away." You take it. You back out. You close the door quietly, like shame slipping back into its corner. Downstairs, Cook glares. "What now? Oh, now, yeah, You tell her. She mutters something about pampered witch and pours another. You carry it back up, reheating your smile on the way. Deliver, nod, leave. The dog growls again. You fantasize briefly about stepping on its absurd little leash. Back in the servants' corridor, you brush invisible lint off your skirt, already dreading the next inspection. Because that's the other joy of formal duty. You're not just expected to look presentable, you're inspected, randomly and with prejudice. The housekeeper makes her rounds shortly after noon. You hear the telltale rustle of her skirts like storm clouds rolling down the hallway. She stops in front of each servant, eyes scanning for flaws. Dust on a collar, you're lazy. Wrinkles in your apron, you're sloppy. Loose button, you're degenerate. When she gets to you, she pauses, looks, then says, "You're listing to one seat." You blink. "Sorry, ma'am." "Your hem. It's uneven. Fix it before dinner service." You nod, heart sinking. The hem, of course, is perfectly even. You measured it twice this morning, but you say nothing. You go downstairs, grab a needle and thread, and redo the entire thing by hand, just in case. Here's a curious debate among historians. Were uniforms a sign of pride or oppression? Some say the consistency and polish gave servants a kind of dignity, a symbol of their vital role in the house. Others argue it was pure control, fashion as a leash. You don't really care what the books say. All you know is that your dignity shouldn't have to come with bleeding feet and a neckline that threatens to strangle you during stair duty. You adjust your collar again as you walk to the dining room. The buttons on the back always dig in when you bend, and you have to wear them fastened high for formal service. Not one can be missed. You can't do them yourself either. This morning Annie helped, tugging and yanking until your spine popped. "Sorry," she muttered. "Your back's being stubborn again." You told her it wasn't the only thing. Dinner begins. You stand to the side like furniture with a pulse. When guests need something, you step forward. Quiet, quick, expressionless. Someone asks for a different knife. Someone spills wine. Someone insists the lamp is too dim. You respond to all of it with poise and a burning sensation in your lower back from standing still for hours. The uniform traps the sweat between your shoulder blades. Your stockings have twisted. Your heel has started bleeding again. You wonder if anyone can smell the blood through the leather. At long last, the guests retire. You clear the table, careful not to let the silver clatter. In the kitchen, the scullery boy has already filled the sink. You pass him the plates. He doesn't meet your eyes. His collar's too big for his neck. He's got it pinned with a safety pin. You envy him. You unbutton your uniform slowly once the day is over. The bodice clings where the sweat's dried. Your ribs are red from the corset stays. You tug off the boots and stare at your toes. Blistered, purple, and slightly swollen. The uniform lies on the chair like a dead thing. Elegant, resacta, utterly exhausting. You crawl into bed wearing only your undershift, legs dangling off the edge. You consider setting your stockings on fire. Instead, you sleep. Tomorrow you'll put it all back on again. The green baize door is just a door. It's wood, with a plain knob and a coat of paint the colour of sickly peas. It doesn't even creak. It doesn't have a lock. But somehow it holds the power of a guillotine. You pass through it several times a day, but never without awareness. It's the threshold between two worlds, theirs and yours. And you? You don't belong on the other side. You're not supposed to look directly into the rooms past that door. You're not supposed to listen when the laughter spills out or when arguments carry down the corridor. You're definitely not supposed to speak unless spoken to. And even then, your voice is meant to be low and deferential, like the murmur of wind in the drapes. You move through the edges of their lives like a shadow, always present, never seen. Today you're assigned to help with the morning refresh, tidying the drawing room, straightening the rug, opening windows to let in a breeze that you, of course, are not allowed to enjoy. You cross through the green baize door just as Lady V's dog bolts past your ankles. You don't react. That's part of it too. The expectation that you're somehow emotionally padded, unbothered, polite in the face of chaos, silent in the face of cruelty. You adjust a chair by a half-inch, you fluff a cushion, you pick up a dropped letter from the floor, carefully placing it on the desk where Lady V will find it later, and accuse someone of moving her things. You open a window even though the draft will undoubtedly be your fault when someone sneezes later. And then, suddenly, she's there. The lady of the house sweeps in like a storm wrapped in silk. She barely acknowledges you, muttering something about her headaches and the dreadful state of the rose garden. You step aside, eyes down, like furniture trained in etiquette. She drops her shawl on a footstool. You bend to retrieve it, place it neatly on the chair arm. She doesn't thank you, she rarely does. Here's a fringe fact you may enjoy. In certain households, even eye contact from a servant was considered offensive. You could be reprimanded for looking directly at a guest, unless of course you were being yelled at, in which case you were expected to make uncomfortable, tear-brimming eye contact while apologising for the state of the asparagus tips. There's scholarly debate over the role of the green baize door. Some historians say it was merely a practical division, keeping the noise and smells of the working areas separate from the living quarters. Others insist it was a symbol, a psychological barrier designed to reinforce the Victorian obsession with hierarchy and separation of classes. To you it's both, a door and a warning, an everyday reminder that you are tolerated but not accepted. After the drawing room you carry clean linens up to the guest suite. The corridor there is brighter, better smelling, and freshly dusted by a maid who never seems to sweat. You place the folded sheets in the linen cupboard, careful to align them perfectly. That's when you hear it. Laughter from the nursery. You shouldn't pause, but you do, just for a second. The children are playing some ridiculous game involving pillows and a wooden sword. Their governess pretends not to notice. Their shoes are scattered across the floor like art. You watch from behind the barely opened door. They don't see you. You wonder what it's like to be loud without consequence, to throw things, to laugh until you hiccup, to not think about how you're being perceived every waking second. Then the hallway bell chimes, and you snap back to reality. It's time to polish the front stair banisters again. They've already been polished. You polished them. But apparently a guest noticed a smudge, and now it's a catastrophe that must be corrected. So you go. You grab the cloth, the polish, the patience, and you kneel beside the steps like a humble little saint of woodwork. As you scrub, voices drift down from the library. The Baroness is still here, speaking loudly about politics she doesn't understand and literature she hasn't read. You hear her ask, "What's that smell?" And someone mutters, "Coal smoke." You pray it's not you. Here's another fun twist. If you're caught standing near the green baize door without a task, the assumption is that you're eavesdropping. That's a serious offence. Doesn't matter if you were just catching your breath or adjusting your apron. The wrong glance, the wrong pause, and you're labelled as insolent. You learn to time your movements perfectly, to know when the hallway is empty, when it is safe to dash through with a tray, when you can slip into the servants' staircase without being seen. It's a dance choreographed by necessity. Graceful, invisible, exhausting. After tea service, you're caught on the wrong side of the baize door for 2 seconds too long. A guest is exiting the drawing room, and you're standing there like a deer in stiff cotton. They don't say anything, but their look is enough. A head tilt, a purse of the lips, a silent scolding you'll remember for hours. You retreat through the door like a criminal, back into the servants' hall, where the air is thick with boiling water and the scent of overcooked cabbage. No one here tilts their head at you. They just grunt, nod, carry on. Cook hands you a basin and tells you to clean the spill in the pantry. You do it, quietly. Later, the housekeeper reminds you that the baize door is not a lounge. You nod, say yes, ma'am, and resist the urge to point out that it doesn't have a single place to sit. As night falls, you pass through it one last time, delivering clean towels to the ladies' bathroom. She doesn't notice you. She's adjusting her earrings, the pearls catching the last glint of lamplight. You place the towels on the stand and retreat. You catch your reflection in the hallway mirror on your way out. You look like a painting half finished, clean but colourless, present but transparent. You pass back through the baize door, let it shut behind you with a soft click, and feel your shoulders loosen. The other side of the house may be gilded and perfumed, but this side, the smudged, scuffed, worn-in part, is where you exist. You return to the scullery, set down your basin, and finally exhale. The door didn't bite today, but it reminded you who you are. Sunday may be the Sabbath, but for you it's also a reminder that even supposed rest comes laced with rules, starch and blisters. And church, of course. Church isn't optional. Not for the family, and so rightly not for the help. In fact, while the master and mistress get to glide into their front pew like Victorian royalty, you're expected to trail behind and occupy the cold back rows, all while pretending you aren't limping from yesterday's silver polishing marathon. But today isn't just any Sunday, it's one of those Sundays. The ones where the master insists the entire household, every last soul, attend service in full uniform. Even the scullery boy, who once caught fire trying to light a gas lamp and hasn't recovered a full sentence since. You all stand in line like mismatched ducks, heads down, collars tight, boots clean to a fault. There's no joy in it, only performance. You're not here to pray, you're here to be seen praying. The morning starts at full gallop. The housekeeper's voice is already slicing through the servants' hall before you've had your first sip of weak tea. Where's the brush for the coat cuffs? Is that hem properly ironed? Don't slouch, girl, this isn't a potato field. You're halfway into your Sunday uniform, that one stiff dress with the too tight bodice and the high collar that makes you feel like a condemned nun. You tug it on anyway. The buttons dig into your spine and the sleeves squeeze your arms like sausage casing. Church uniforms are worse than everyday wear. They're supposed to be modest, but really they're just punitive. And then there's the hat. You don't know who designed this particular disaster, but it's lopsided, smells faintly of mothballs and regret, and has a ribbon that flaps against your cheek like it's trying to whisper insults directly into your ear. You line up with the others by the back door, waiting for the master's carriage to leave first. You go second, walking the long gravel path to the village chapel, your shoes kicking up dust that clings to your stockings like powdered judgment. Your posture has to be just so, your expression mild. You can't look too pleased. That would be suspicious. But you can't look too dour either, or people might assume you're not grateful enough for your station. The chapel itself is tiny, old, and slightly damp-smelling. The pews creak. The air's filled with that special kind of church silence, the kind that judges you before the sermon even begins. You file into the last two rows, still warm from the gardener's earlier shift. The priest's sermon begins shortly after, a predictable lecture on humility and obedience. You feel the words roll over you like hot porridge, thick, bland, mildly painful. Blessed are the meek, he says, and you want to raise your hand and ask, how meek exactly? Is foot-scraping and bell-answering meek enough, or should we aim for doormat levels of submission? Here's a fringe fact that might make you sigh into your hymn book. In many large households, servants were monitored during church, not just by the housekeeper or the butler, but by the family themselves. They'd keep little mental notes, who sang too loudly, who looked bored, who fidgeted. Once, a parlour maid got in trouble for nodding off during the benediction. She claimed it was a migraine. The master claimed she was disrespectful. She was gone by Thursday. After the final hymn, you file back to the house in silence, muscles sore from sitting upright on unforgiving wood for an hour straight. You'd like a nap. You'd like to loosen your collar and eat something warm. Instead, you go straight to lunch prep. Church doesn't mean the family won't be hungry. They're always hungry, especially after a sermon on self-denial. Cook's already mid-rant when you arrive in the kitchen. She's holding a chicken by the leg and waving it around like a weapon. This bird is half the size it should be. What am I supposed to serve? Air and feathers? You don't answer. You peel potatoes. That's your task today. 47 potatoes. All uniform size, all without nicks or bruises. You sit on the edge of a stool, shoulders hunched, and try not to cut your thumb again. Somewhere upstairs, the Baroness is complaining that the bread rolls were too dense yesterday. She doesn't know they were baked at 4 a.m. by a girl who hasn't had a day off in 6 weeks. You try not to dwell on it. The more you think, the more bitter you get, and bitter isn't allowed in a house like this, not unless it's in marmalade. After lunch, the family lounges in the drawing room. You're tasked with Sunday polishing, which is just like Monday polishing, only with more oversight. You kneel by the piano, cloth in hand, moving in circles so precise they could be measured with a compass. The mistress glances over once, says nothing, and resumes her knitting. You polish a little faster. Here's a point of contention among historians, whether servants ever got true rest. Some say Sunday afternoons offered a sacred hour for reading or letter writing. Others argue it was just an illusion, a bit of string dangled hidden in front of a cat to keep it from noticing its cage. From where you're kneeling, it's definitely the latter. There's always something, always someone who needs a handkerchief or water, or their hat brushed, or their dog chased out of the pantry. By late afternoon, you're allowed to eat. Dinner, if you can call it that, is cold beef from 2 days ago, and a lump of bread that could double as a doorstop. You chew with determination, not because it's tasty, but because it's all you're getting. You hear the scullery boy whisper that his stomach hurts. No one responds. Evening brings candle duty. You check each holder, trim the wicks, replace the melted wax, and relight every room before the family emerges again for their evening tea. It's delicate work. One missed wick and someone might trip in the hallway and declare it an unforgivable safety hazard. You light the last candle just as the Baroness passes by, her shawl trailing like a bridal train. She doesn't look at you. You look at the flame, willing it to stay lit. You return to the servants' hall just after dusk. Your shoulders ache. Your back thrubs. You still smell like boiled potatoes and candle grease. You loosen your collar, finally, and sit down at the far bench. Someone offers you the dregs of the teapot. It's cold, but you sip it anyway. You think back to the sermon. Blessed are the meek. You wonder if meekness comes with benefits. Dental, perhaps. Then the hallway bell rings. You stand up, collar stiff again. Back to the front lines, you wake up to a sore throat. Not a tickle, not a dry mouth from the attic air. No, this is the deep, sharp kind of pain that comes with fever and regret. You try to swallow, and it feels like dragging sandpaper down your windpipe. Your head throbs behind your eyes. Your joints ache like you've been trampled by a tea trolley. It's official. You're ill. You lie still for a moment, weighing your options, which is generous of your brain because you don't have any. You're not allowed to be sick. You're not even allowed to act sick. You're a servant, not a person. You're an appliance that walks and breathes. Appliances don't get to call in sick. So you get up, slowly, carefully. Every motion makes your body protest, your muscles refusing like they have just now remembered how overworked they've been for the last 3 years. The attic air is cold and your thin blanket might as well be made of hope and lint. You fumble into your uniform, fingers trembling as you try to button your bodice. You can't quite focus. Your vision swims every time you look down. Your shoes feel like they've shrunk overnight. You tie your apron crooked, then untie it and start over. The second knot comes out even worse. You leave it. There's no time to fuss over symmetry when you're dying on your feet. Downstairs, the kitchen is already alive with clanging pans and rising steam. Cook barely glances at you before thrusting a bucket into your hands. "Ash buckets to the yard," she snaps, like it's not the 5th day in a row she's handed you the heaviest job before breakfast. You nod. You carry the bucket out into the chill morning air, legs shaky, chest burning. The coal ashes are still warm. The steam rises as you pour them out into the heap behind the scullery. You cough. It sounds terrible. Deep, rattling, wet. You glance around quickly, making sure no one hears. If the housekeeper gets wind that you're unwell, she'll either ignore it or assign you double work as a lesson in not being weak. There's a fringe fact here that would be funny if it weren't your actual life. Some Victorian households kept a second sick room not for the family, but for ill servants. Sounds compassionate, right? Except it wasn't. These rooms were often unheated, windowless cupboards meant to isolate you so you wouldn't infect the upstairs. If you were too ill to work but not ill enough to die, you were thrown into that icy little purgatory with a crust of bread and the hope your fever didn't get worse. You're not sick enough for that yet, but it's coming. You can feel it in your bones. By mid-morning, you're behind on your tasks, you move slower. Everything takes longer. The dusting isn't done, the drawing room fire hasn't been lit, the bell has rung 3 times, and you missed it twice. You expect someone to scold you at any moment, and then, of course, they do. The housekeeper corners you in the hallway. Her eyes are sharp. "You're pale," she says, like it's a personal affront. You nod. "Didn't sleep well, ma'am," she sniffs. "We've all got problems. Finish the silver before luncheon." She walks off before you can reply, not that you would. Words are precious when your throat feels like it's lined with thorns. You slump into the pantry to polish the silver. The bright metal reflects your flushed face. You look awful. Your cheeks are too red. Your eyes too dull. You breathe slowly, trying to keep from coughing onto the family's dinner forks. You take short breaks, pretending to refill the polish just to steady yourself against the counter. Someone once told you that working through illness was a kind of noble suffering, that servants built character this way, that it made you resilient. What it really does is make you delirious enough to try lifting the silver tea service with shaking arms and nearly drop it. You catch it just in time, but the clang echoes through the room. You freeze. No one comes. You exhale. Here's the thing no one talks about. You can't heal in this job. Not really. Illness just becomes another weight you carry. There's no doctor for you. No warm broth and clean sheets. If the family is kind, you might get an extra lump of sugar in your tea. If they're not, and they usually aren't, you get blamed for moving slowly, breathing too loudly, or looking contagious. And when the family does fall ill, you're expected to tend to them. Bring soup, change linens, empty basins, light fires, and somehow not catch it yourself. Or if you do, at least have the courtesy to not look it. Back in the hallway, you trip slightly on the stairs. Your ankle twists, not badly, but it slows you down even more. The undermaid glances at you with something like pity. Or maybe it's disgust. Either way, she walks on. You don't expect her help. At lunchtime, you don't eat. Your stomach is churning. Even the smell of stew makes your head spin. You sit on the edge of the bench, hands in your lap, staring into space. The scullery boy offers you a half-stale biscuit. You shake your head. He shrugs and eats it himself. Afternoon comes in a blur. You're asked to carry water to the guest suite. You try. You spill half of it down the front of your dress. The lady's maid rolls her eyes. Try not to soak the carpet, she snaps, snatching the pitcher from your hands. You sit on the back step for 5 minutes after that, pretending to tie your shoe. You're actually just trying not to faint. The sky is overcast. Your breath fogs in the air. The cold feels like a kindness. Evening is worse. Dinner prep is endless. The roast takes forever. The heat from the stove bakes your fever until your scalp prickles. You think about asking the housekeeper for rest. You picture the look she'd give you. You don't ask. Instead, you finish your chores. You crawl back up to the attic after dark, dress soaked with sweat, body trembling. You barely manage to unlace your boots. Your pillow is lumpy, your blanket feels like burlap. But you don't care. You lie down. Every muscle screams. Your breath wheezes in your chest. You stare at the ceiling. It flickers with a lamplight from the alley. You wonder how bad you'll feel tomorrow. Then you cough once, deep, loud, painful. You hear someone stir in the bed across the room. No one says anything. You close your eyes, and you hope it passes, because if it doesn't, you're not sure they'll let you stay. You don't expect to be summoned, not directly, not by name, but this morning the butler appears in the scullery looking like death in a waistcoat and says, "You're wanted upstairs." No explanation, no hint of what you're walking into. He just flicks his eyes toward the stairs and vanishes again like a bad omen. You're still sick. Not in the dramatic Victorian fainting on a chaise kind of way, but the heavy, glue in your lungs, headache behind your eyes kind of sick. You don't complain. You wipe your hands on your apron, straighten your posture, and climb the stairs slowly, trying not to wheeze loud enough to echo. Whatever this is, you don't want to arrive sounding like a haunted organ. You knock gently on the door of the ladies' sitting room. "Come," she says, her voice sharp and cold as ever. Inside, the air smells of perfume and something else, something raw and acrid that curls your stomach. You see the lady seated in her chair, her face pale, her hair only half pinned. Next to her is something wrapped in a blanket on the chaise lounge. A shape, a small one. You freeze. "Take that down to the scullery," she says, gesturing to the bundle. Her voice is clipped. No explanation, no emotion. Quietly. You move forward and see what it is. A baby. Barely a few days old by the looks of it. Not swaddled properly. Not wrapped for the cold. A tiny fist clenched near its cheek. Face red and blotchy. Mouth slack with sleep. Or something close to it. You pick it up carefully, feeling the weight of it settle in your arms like a question you don't want to answer. The baby makes a sound, not quite a cry, not quite a breath, and you suppress a shiver that has nothing to do with your fever. "Mrs. Carrow will take it from there." "Oh," the lady adds, not looking at you now. "Be discreet." Discreet. The word hovers in the air like incense. You carry the bundle down the back stairs, each step careful, deliberate. The baby's face presses against your shoulder, warm and oddly silent. You don't look at it again. You don't want to see too much. Learn too much. Think too much. In the scullery, Mrs. Carrow is waiting. She's not usually here, she works in the village. A midwife mostly, occasionally something else. She nods at you, takes the child, and disappears out the servant door without a word. You stand there, arms suddenly empty, unsure if you've just done something terrible or kind. You go back to polishing silver like nothing happened. Here's the truth no one says aloud. Babies appear and disappear in houses like this, quietly, behind curtains and under blankets. Sometimes you hear a late-night cry from a guest room where no guest is listed. Sometimes a chambermaid misses a week of duty, then returns thinner, quieter. The other girls say nothing. The housekeeper certainly says nothing, and eventually neither do you. There's a fringe fact you once overheard. Some grand homes had entire wings designed to hide delicate matters. Secret backstairs, hidden chambers, even private birthing rooms with access only for the family doctor and whichever poor servant had the nerve to assist. The goal wasn't secrecy for its own sake, it was reputation. Reputation, that glittering god you all bow to. There's debate too among scholars. Some say such arrangements were acts of compassion, a way to quietly resolve accidents without scandal. Others argue it was exploitation layered under silk and lace, trapping women with no real agency and blaming the help when consequences arose. You don't know which side is right, you just know that no one cared what the servant thought. Later in the kitchen, cook says nothing when you enter, but her eyes flick briefly to your face, then away. She knows, of course she does, everyone knows eventually. The whole house hums with things unsaid. You return to your duties. There are dishes to scrub, floors to mop, windows to polish. No one asks you how you're feeling. No one asks if you're okay. They wouldn't, even if you were bleeding from the ears. You're just the help. If you look shaken, they'll say you're being dramatic. If you cry, you'll be told to do it in your own time, not the household's. And you want to cry, if you're honest. Not because of the baby exactly, but because of what it represents. The quiet tragedies that hover beneath this entire house. The way grief gets tucked into drawers and sealed behind smiles. The way responsibility trickles downward, like spilled wine, staining only the servants who dared be nearby. Around midday the lady's bell rings again. You answer it with calm hands and tired eyes. She's sitting by the window this time, perfectly composed, a plate of untouched toast on her lap. "Have the nursery linens changed?" she says, still not looking at you. "The room's no longer needed." You nod. You descend the stairs and pass through the servant hallway like a ghost. You don't say a word to the other girls, though they're looking at you now with that particular kind of awareness. The one that says, "I know what you carried. And thank God it wasn't me." You strip the nursery sheets slowly, gently, folding each one as if they might still hold something fragile. The cradle is empty. The rocking chair still moves slightly, as if someone just rose from it. The air smells of lavender water and milk, and you pause, let yourself breathe, then you carry the linens down to the wash. Back in the servants' hall, the butler passes you without a glance. The housekeeper does the same. It's as though the morning never happened. But you feel it, in your arms, in your bones, a lingering weight that hasn't quite let go. That night, while brushing the ashes from the front parlour fireplace, you catch your reflection in the polished brass fender. Your face is pale, your eyes are sunken, but you look calm. You've learned. Everything here is seen, and nothing is ever spoken. You've never belonged upstairs, but the truth is you don't belong downstairs either. Not really. You exist somewhere in between, floating just outside the lines, drawn so carefully by people who have never had to clean a fireplace with a toothbrush or carry a bucket of waste down 3 flights of stairs. You're too polished to be poor, too invisible to be respected. And tonight, for reasons you can't quite name, that truth sits heavier than usual. It begins with a visit from the lady's cousin. Not the Baroness, she's thankfully gone, trailing perfume and judgment behind her, but a younger man this time, a Mr. Halliday. He's well-dressed, well-mannered, and unfortunately very aware of how his presence makes the help nervous. You serve him tea in the drawing room and catch his eyes on you for 1 beat too long. He smiles, that too long kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes and feels like a hook being lowered into your skin. You say nothing. You leave the tray. You back out of the room with your eyes lowered, heart quickening like a rabbit's. Back in the scullery, the girls are talking about him, softly, carefully. One of them calls him charming, another calls him dangerous. You sit quietly, polishing a silver spoon until your fingers ache. You don't add to the conversation. You know better. That night, as you're gathering laundry from the guest wing, you run into him. Alone, you hear his boots before you see him. You try to duck into the linen closet, but he sees you. He says something innocuous. A comment about the chill in the hall. You nod politely, clutching the towels tighter. He steps closer, says something else. Something about how quiet the house is this time of evening. You try to smile without encouraging him. You sidestep, mutter an excuse, and disappear down the servant stairs as quickly as your dignity will let you. Nothing happened. Technically, he didn't touch you, he didn't say anything overt, but you felt it. That shift in air, that knowledge, that careful balancing act between standing your ground and not making waves. If you complain, they'll say you imagined it. If you avoid him, they'll say you're rude. You're a servant. You're supposed to be agreeable, but never inviting. Silent, but never secretive. Present, but never visible. It's a tightrope with no net. Later, while folding sheets, you think about where you exist in this world. You're not like the maids who came from farming families, rough and blunt and used to cold. You've lived with lace and porcelain for years now. You know which fork is for fish. You can read. You even speak a little French, courtesy of that governess who was too lonely to keep her language to herself. You know how to carry a tray without clinking the cups. You know how to keep your face smooth, your tone soft, your steps silent. But none of that makes you one of them. Still, you don't quite belong with the housemaids either. You don't smoke behind the coal shed. You don't flirt with the footman. You don't sneak wine from the cellar, tempting as it is. They think you're proper, or cold, or both. And so you drift. Respected but not liked. Trusted but not included. You've built a life out of being in between. There's a fringe fact from some journal you once dusted. In larger houses, certain senior servants were discouraged from mingling too much with the lower staff. Too familiar, they'd say. Too casual. You couldn't be part of the family, and you couldn't be part of the staff. So where did that leave you? Exactly where you are now. Folding sheets in silence while the kitchen buzzes and the drawing room fills with laughter you'll never join. Scholars sometimes write about the servant class as a monolith. Hundreds of thousands of girls and boys all labouring under the same conditions. But the truth is, you all lived different versions of the same captivity. Some rose through the ranks, others married out, a few escaped to the colonies. Most just stayed, got older, slower, eventually replaced. You once asked the housekeeper what happens to servants who age out. They become cautionary tales, she said, sipping her tea. Tonight your cautionary tale is Margaret, the former under housemaid. She was here when you arrived. Quick, competent, proud. Then she twisted her ankle on the stairs. Couldn't keep up. Got demoted to laundry. Started coughing. Was gone by Christmas. No one said where she went. You remember her face sometimes. Sharp cheekbones, quiet laugh, vanished like a plot twist no one was ready for. After the sheets, you help with the evening fire rounds. The drawing room is still warm from earlier, but you stoke it anyway. The logs catch slowly, crackling in the grate. You stand for a moment too long, letting the heat kiss your cheeks. The room is empty. Just for a second, you pretend it's yours. You walk through the green baize door again, returning to the world of slate floors and tepid broth. The other girls are setting the table for your supper, cold meat and potatoes. One of them asks if you're all right. You nod. She squints. You're flushed. Just warm from the fire. She nods but doesn't quite believe you. No one ever really does. You eat quickly, mechanically, no one talks much tonight. The footman tried to kiss the laundry maid behind the stables and got slapped. The kitchen maid is nursing a burn, the scullery boy hasn't spoken in 2 days, and no one's asked why. Everyone's tired, everyone's surviving. When supper ends, you scrub the table, check the pantry locks, and climb the attic stairs to your bed. You change in the dark. You lie awake for an hour, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. You don't know what you're waiting for. Sleep, maybe. Or something to change, but nothing will, not here, and not for you. You're too proper for pity, too poor for protection, too visible to ignore, too invisible to remember. The cold seeps in before the morning does. It starts in your toes, already curled beneath threadbare stockings, and climbs into your knees, your spine, the back of your neck. You're not just shivering, you're brittle. The kind of cold that makes you wonder if you're still breathing because your breath no longer mists the air. It's winter now, the real kind, Victorian winter. No central heating, no double glazing, no warm up the car before work. Just stone floors, cracked windows, and a household that somehow demands even more from you when your fingers can barely move. You rise before dawn. You can't see anything in the attic but shapes, but that doesn't matter. You've done this routine so many times your body moves without needing sight. You pull on your stiffest dress, the only one thick enough to count as winter appropriate, and wrap your shawl around your shoulders 3 times. It's still not enough. You can see your breath. You can feel the air inside your chest scraping against your ribs, but you go. Downstairs, the hallway is darker than usual. The lamps were left off to conserve gas, and the fire has yet to be lit. You carry a box of kindling to the hearth like an offering. Kneel and get to work. Your fingers fumble with the match, once, twice, finally a spark. The flame flares weakly, licking at the paper, then dies. You try again. Lighting a fire sounds simple, until you're doing it with hands so numb they feel like someone else's. Your fingers don't bend right. Your sleeves keep falling into your face. You hunch lower, nose nearly in the soot, trying to breathe warmth into something that doesn't want to catch. Finally, it does. The fire crackles half-heartedly. You add coal. The room glows just enough to confirm how miserable you look in the brass fender's reflection. You light 3 more fires before the household wakes. Each one leaves you a little blacker around the wrists and a little more chilled in the bones. No one thanks you. They expect the fires to simply exist. Comfort in this house must appear effortless. Here's your quirky fringe fact of the day. In larger households, there were sometimes dedicated fireboys, young lads whose sole job was to light, stoke, and maintain every hearth. They'd crawl out of bed at 3 in the morning and spend hours lugging coal and coaxing flames into existence. You, being of the wrong gender and the wrong age, don't get that title, but you still get the job. As the sun begins to rise, a pale, cold shrug of a sun that doesn't really care, the master's bell rings. Of course it does. You leave the fire half done and rush upstairs, boots clunking against the stone steps. He wants hot water. For shaving, always hot water. You fill the kettle and carry it up, the metal biting into your raw fingers. The kettle sloshes. One spill and you'll soiled your skirt again. You knock. You enter. He barely glances up, just gestures to the basin like he's directing a particularly clumsy ghost. You pour the water, the steam rises, you hold your breath, you curtsy, you leave. The corridor is colder than the room. Of course it is. You pull your shawl tighter. It smells like smoke and old soap. You make your way back downstairs. Breakfast prep is already underway. Cook is swearing. The bacon won't crisp. The eggs are frozen. You're asked to fetch firewood from the shed. You try not to groan. The shed is a walk across the courtyard. No cover. Wind like a slap. You trudge outside, breath fogging, apron flapping behind you like a torn flag. The sky is grey. Your boots crunch on the frost. The shed door sticks, frozen, in place. You kick it. It creaks open like it's in pain. Inside, wood. Dry, splintery, and somehow colder than the air. You gather an armful, it digs into your skin. A splinter wedges itself under your nail. You curse under your breath, then curse yourself for cursing. You head back in, clutching the firewood like a baby made of punishment. By midday your fingers have stopped bleeding, but not hurting. The skin around your knuckles is cracked. You apply tallow when no one's looking. It stinks, but it works, somewhat. You've seen what happens when frostbite sets in. Last year the stable boy lost his 2 toes. Poor circulation, they said. Poor gloves is what they meant. There's scholarly debate over just how dire winter conditions were for domestic staff. Some records show servants with decent coal allowances and occasional warm drinks. Others describe frost-covered pillows, chilblains, and permanent respiratory damage from sleeping in unheated attics. Your version leans toward the latter. Your breath fogs the air inside your bedroom. Your bed is damp. Your toes haven't thawed since November. You eat your lunch in silence. Cold beef again, cold bread, cold tea, your jaw aches from chewing. You miss warmth more than anything. Not hot baths or fireplaces, just simple warmth. A scarf that doesn't itch. A chair that's not drafty. A room that doesn't feel like a punishment. Afternoon brings the laundry again, of course. This time you're asked to help hang sheets in the yard. You nod and follow instructions, even though the idea of wet linen in this weather feels like a crime. The steam from the laundry tub is the only heat you've known today. It clings to your face for a moment, then vanishes as the wind slices through. You haul the basket out to the yard, teeth chattering, fingers stiff. The sheets are heavy. They slap in the wind like angry flags. You pin them up with frozen fingers, trying to keep the cloth from whipping you in the face. One sheet snaps free and lands in a puddle. You don't cry. You just pick it up, sling it over your shoulder, and carry it back to be re-washed. The housekeeper will call you careless. You'll say nothing. As night falls, the cold sharpens. You light the evening fires again. You do it faster now, almost expertly. You've learned which rooms have the most stubborn grates, which logs burn best, which pokers won't bite your hands. You finish in the drawing room just before the lady enters. She nods. That's all. A nod. You take it like a gold medal. Back in the attic, you peel off your dress. Your skin is pale and blotchy. You rub your arms, trying to coax feeling back into them. Your hands shake. Your knees knock. You crawl into bed, pulling the blanket up to your chin, tucking your feet into your skirts to warm them. Sleep doesn't come quickly. It's too cold. You lie there, teeth clenched, staring into the dark. Somewhere outside, a branch snaps under the weight of frost. You close your eyes and pray for spring. You swear it starts as a draft, just a whisper of cold air that trickles along the floorboards and brushes your ankles when you pass by the linen press. You pause, look around, feel the hair rise at the back of your neck, but there's no one there, just the usual dim hallway, the soft hiss of the gas lamp, and the comforting smell of starch and beeswax. Still, the air has changed. It feels watching. Later, while delivering hot water to the blue guest room, you feel it again. That sense that something is in the room with you. Not a person, not even quite a presence, just a prickling stillness, like someone just breathed down your collar and stepped out of reach. You glance over your shoulder. The room is empty, silent. The fire's burned down to low embers. The air smells faintly of lavender, and something fainter still, dust and rosewater and something older, sourer. You leave the pitcher on the washstand and back out quickly. There's a reason no one likes the blue guest room. They'll tell you it's because the windows rattle and the floorboards slope, but that's not it. Not really. The truth is, servants have been whispering about that room for years. Not always openly. No one wants a reputation for superstition. But you've heard the muttered prayers, the nervous glances, the excuse-making when someone's told to turn down the bed. The cook calls it bad air. The housemaid says it's the wallpaper. The undermaid won't set foot inside after sunset. You didn't believe in ghosts before you took this job. Now, you're not so sure. Back in the attic that night, Annie brings it up without being asked. "You feel it today?" she whispers across the narrow space between your beds. Her voice is careful, like a match held too close to a curtain. You nod. She shivers under her blanket. Happens every year around this time. You ask why, though you're not sure you want the answer. She hesitates. There was a girl years ago, scullery maid, I think, got locked in the linen cupboard. By accident, they say. Or maybe not. Found her 3 days later, cold and quiet. You blink. You've passed that cupboard a dozen times this week. Annie continues, barely audible now. Blue guest room used to be hers. They moved her out when she started talking to people who weren't there. You lie still for a long time after that. Here's a historical tidbit for your troubles. Victorian servants were notoriously superstitious, especially those who worked long hours alone, in laundries, attics, or cold cellars. You spend enough time in silence, surrounded by shadows and the weight of a house breathing around you, and you'll start to feel things too. Many houses even kept a clergyman on speed dial, not for the family's spiritual well-being, but to bless a nursery that felt wrong or say prayers in a room where no one slept properly. There's some scholarly debate, of course. Some argue these tales were invented by staff to explain away exhaustion and mental strain. Others say they were quietly accepted by the households themselves. After all, even the upper class had their ghost stories, and their reasons for keeping certain doors locked. The next day it escalates. You're in the dining room, polishing the sideboard before lunch. It's early. No one else is about. The light through the windows is watery and thin, and then, very softly, you hear a hum. A tune, coming from the hallway. You say you stop. Listen. It's a lullaby. Familiar. Something you've heard before but can't place. And it's wrong, too slow, too flat. The kind of sound that drags against your spine like fingernails. You step into the hallway. It's empty. The tune stops. You return to your polishing with your heart in your throat. Later that day, the nursery maid mentions the same thing. Someone humming outside the door this morning, she says absently. while peeling an apple in the scullery. Thought it was the governess, but she hadn't come down yet. You share a look. You don't talk about it again. That night a tray goes missing. You swear you left it on the table beside the stairs. The undermaid confirms she saw it too, but when you go back, gone. You search everywhere. Behind curtains, under furniture, nothing. It turns up the next morning on the third-floor landing, neatly placed, untouched, perfectly clean. No one claims to have moved it. Cook calls it mischief. The housekeeper calls it laziness. You just call it what it is, unsettling. Here's a fringe detail pulled from a servant's diary you once glimpsed while cleaning the butler's pantry. Some homes, especially older ones, had a bad room. A room no one slept in. No one entered unless necessary. The door was kept locked, the windows closed, the fire left cold. No one admitted why, but everyone knew. You're starting to think the blue guest room is your house's bad room. By the end of the week, no one wants that hallway duty. The linen closet door creaks even when it's closed. The mirror on the landing has a smudge that won't wipe off, shaped almost like a handprint, and the gas lamp near the guest room flickers even though the rest stay steady. The butler claims it's the wind. You stop questioning it. You're cleaning the parlour one evening just before supper. It's quiet, peaceful even. The fire is crackling gently, the curtains are drawn, then the door creaks open behind you. You assume it's the housemaid. You turn. No one's there, just the empty hallway and the faint scent of lavender water. You close the door, lock it. Finish your work with quick hands and you're back to the wall. That night, when you climb into bed, you pull the blanket higher than usual. The wind howls outside, the attic groans like it's trying to stretch. You hear footsteps on the servants' stairs. Too slow, too heavy, too far past curfew. You tell yourself it's someone else, just another servant. You close your eyes. The hum starts again. This time it's closer. It's not in the rules. You've read them. Well, the ones posted in the servants' hall next to the tea shelf stained with soot and sticky fingerprints. Nowhere does it say you can't fall in love. But everyone knows you're not supposed to. Not with anyone inside the house, not with another servant, certainly not with someone upstairs. Love is a luxury and you don't get those here. Still, it happens. It starts small the way all dangerous things do, a glance and a shared joke, a sleeve brushed in a narrow hallway, a borrowed pencil. You and Thomas, one of the second footmen, you're not even sure how it began, only that it did. And now, every time you pass in the corridor or share a word while polishing the sconces outside the study, something electric skitters under your skin. You tell yourself it's harmless, you're careful. You keep your distance when others are near. You don't linger in the pantry, don't stand too close at dinner. But still, there's something there, a warmth, a sliver of something private in a life where nothing belongs to you. And today it turns, just a little. You're in the laundry yard, hanging out sheets, your hands are red from cold, your breath puffing in clouds, and Thomas appears behind you with a basket of kitchen linens. No one else is around. He sets the basket down and says quietly, "You missed breakfast." You blink. "I overslept." He hands you a crust of bread already buttered. You don't take it at first. You look at him. He shrugs. "I saved it for you." It's a small thing, bread and butter, but it's also enormous. You eat it in silence. He hangs towels beside you. For 5 minutes the world slows. The wind whips the sheets into sails, and the sky stays pale and wide and no one calls your name. For 5 minutes you forget your aching back and blistered palms and the fact that falling for someone like him could get you both dismissed. There's a strange little fringe fact for you. In some households, servants weren't even allowed to speak to one another outside their specific duties. If two were caught talking in the corridor, it could be considered loitering, or worse, gossip. Affection was seen as a threat to discipline. Emotions were distractions. Attachments bred rebellion. You've read stories, maids fired for lingering glances, kitchen boys sent away for slipping notes under napkin stacks. The housekeeper once told you about a parlour maid who eloped with a groom. "Ran off with the silver," she said grimly, though you suspect it was only her dignity. After your bread and butter moment, you're extra careful. You return to your duties with renewed urgency, scouring the stair rail until your knuckles shine. But your mind is elsewhere. It replays his face in the cold, his awkward smile, the way his eyes lingered, just long enough to feel like an invitation. You run into him again that evening, at the back staircase. while delivering tea trays. He's coming down with a coat draped over one arm, still in livery. The stairwell is narrow. You pass close. He doesn't touch you, but he looks at you. He says your name softly. You both freeze, just for a second. Then the footman behind him calls out, "Thomas!" And the moment fractures. He nods once, keeps walking. You do too. Upstairs, the lady of the house is waiting for her tea. She asks for lemon, she asks for her shawl, she doesn't look at you. You deliver everything with mechanical grace. Your heart is still racing. There's no privacy in love here. Every glance is a risk. Every word might be overheard. And even if no one catches you, everyone's watching. The house breathes gossip. The undercook already suspects. The scullery maid gave you a look at dinner you didn't know how to answer. Later that night, the housekeeper stops you in the corridor. Her voice is smooth, but her eyes are sharp. "Keep to your station," she says. No explanation, no context. You nod. "Yes, ma'am." She walks away. You lie in bed that night staring at the ceiling. The attic creaks, the others sleep. Your stomach is hollow, not from hunger, but from the weight of possibility. What happens if someone finds out? Would they separate you, send him to another house, keep you and dismiss him? Or worse, would they call you the seductress? You're a servant, but you're still a girl. And in this house, a girl with feelings is dangerous. A girl with visible feelings is expendable. Some historians say that relationships between servants were common and tolerated, so long as discretion was maintained. Others suggest that households saw romance among the staff as a breeding ground for scandal, and cracked down accordingly. The reality probably sat somewhere between, tolerated until it wasn't, ignored until it was inconvenient. You're not sure where you fall yet. A few nights later, Thomas leaves a folded scrap of paper near the broom cupboard. You spot it while fetching coal. It's a page torn from a ledger, scribbled in pencil. "They'll be in the garden after the bells." You burn the note immediately. But that night you slip outside, just once, just long enough to feel the moonlight on your hands and his fingers brush yours. You don't speak, you just stand there. Two servants, two ghosts, caught in a world where love isn't forbidden. It's simply erased. You stay for 5 minutes. You return to the kitchen before anyone notices. You sleep with a smile on your face for the first time in months. But when you wake, you know it can't last. Love here is fragile. A secret carried in a coal scuttle. A whisper behind the baize door. A risk wrapped in silence. And you've just taken it. There's a particular look servants give each other when something is off. Not broken, not missing, not spilled off. Like the kitchen door that swings open too quietly, or a tea tray that arrives before it's called for, or the housekeeper smiling. That's what happens today. The housekeeper smiles. Wide, too wide. It puts everyone on edge. She smiles like something's already been decided, and no one's told you yet. By midday you know why. Miss Allerton, the master's elder sister, has arrived. Unannounced. Always unannounced. She's the kind of guest who makes everyone scramble and drop things. She glides into the parlour wrapped in black bombazine and brimstone, her umbrella clicking like a metronome of doom. She doesn't visit often, but when she does, the walls seem to tighten around you, like they're preparing for something explosive. You remember her last visit. Someone was fired for laughing too loud. This time it's worse, because this time she has taken a liking to the soup. At dinner, you're in the corner of the dining room, hands folded, face neutral, listening to the silver scrape across porcelain. She puts her spoon down, dabs her lips, and says, "That soup was divine. I could kiss the cook." The room goes still. The cook, of course, is in the kitchen, sweating through her apron and shouting at the scullery boy to stop peeling the potatoes, like they owe you money. She'll never hear the compliment, but the butler hears, and the lady of the house hears, and you, God help you, smile. Just a flicker, a twitch, not even a full smile, a micro-expression of irony because you know the soup was burned on the bottom and masked with too much pepper. Miss Allerton catches it. She says nothing, just looks at you, not a hard glare, not even a frown, just a look, clinical, like she's mentally rearranging the furniture and deciding whether you go with the drapes. You school your face immediately, blank, blank, too late. The next morning the house is buzzing, tense, controlled. Everyone's quieter. The bells ring more often. The lady snaps about the drawing room carpet. The master mutters something about overstaying her welcome. But Miss Allerton is still here, and she's requested a personal servant for the morning. Just a girl, she says. Someone neat and intelligent. The housekeeper picks you. Of course she does. You arrive outside Miss Allerton's room, hands clenched in your apron. You knock. Enter. She's seated at the vanity, hair unpinned, one stocking halfway on. The dog, an impossibly fluffy Pomeranian named Plum, is gnawing something under the chaise. It looks like a glove. Brush this, she says, gesturing to her hair. No greeting, no thanks. You do it. Fetch my scarf. You do that too. She doesn't speak for a while, just lets you stand there, hands clasped. Then she says, without turning around, "You're the one with the clever eyes." You freeze. "Pardon, ma'am? I saw you smile at dinner." You don't answer. "Servants shouldn't smile unless spoken to," she says. Still calm, still even. It looks presumptuous, as if you have thoughts. You swallow. "Apologies, ma'am." She finally turns, fixing you with a stare so sharp it could peel an orange. "You do have thoughts, though, don't you?" You say nothing. She leans closer. That can be a problem. Then she dismisses you with a wave. No yelling, no threat. Just a dismissal so final it leaves a ringing in your ears. You flee down the stairs, heart pounding. Your apron's damp with sweat. You don't remember half the steps. In the kitchen, the cook looks up, sees your face, and hands you a rag to squeeze. No questions, just shared understanding. That evening, the lady of the house asks for tea earlier than usual. You prepare it, but when you enter the drawing room, Miss Allerton is already there. She watches you pour, doesn't say a word. The lady makes little conversation about the weather. You don't breathe until you're out of the room. Back in the scullery, Thomas finds you elbow deep in soap. You don't see him at first. You're too busy scrubbing a pan like it personally offended you. "You all right?" he asks gently. You nod, not looking up. "She said something, didn't she?" You nod again. He leans on the doorway, eyes scanning you, then says, almost to himself, "You ever think about leaving?" You stop scrubbing. Your heart stutters. He doesn't wait for an answer. Just pushes off the doorframe. "I do." You don't sleep that night. Not much. You keep thinking about her voice, that eerie calm, the way she looked at you like she was reading a story that hadn't ended yet. You wonder if she'll say something to the lady, or worse, the master or the housekeeper. You keep remembering that line. That can be a problem. Here's a historical curiosity. While Victorian households had strict chains of command, a powerful guest could disrupt everything. A single comment from the right aristocrat could get a servant fired, relocated, or worse, blacklisted. A guest's word, in many cases, outweighed years of loyalty, especially if they were family. There's scholarly disagreement about how often guests meddled in household matters. Some records suggest it was rare, others show letters between mistresses swapping observations about staff like recipe tips. You suspect the truth is this: no one really meddled until it was entertaining. The next morning, the housekeeper pulls you aside. "You'll be reassigned to the laundry for the week," she says simply. "Miss Allerton prefers someone else for her rooms." You nod. You don't argue. You just say, "Yes, ma'am," and walk to the laundry room. Thomas is there, folding towels, and you don't speak, but he passes you a cloth, his fingers brushing yours for half a second longer than they need to. That night you dream of her voice again. The look, the question. You do have thoughts, don't you? You do, and now they're dangerous. The laundry room is its own kind of punishment. Hot in the summer, freezing in the winter, and always damp enough to make your bones feel like they've grown moss. The air is thick with steam, the floor slick with soapy water that never quite evaporates. Everything smells of starch, sweat, and scorched cotton. There's no view, no breeze, just a single high window stained with decades of fog and a rusting rack that wobbles when you hang too many petticoats on it. You've been reassigned here for the week, but everyone knows what that means. It's a demotion, a silent punishment. Not enough to dismiss you outright, but enough to remind you you're replaceable. You don't mind the work itself. It's honest, it's private almost, but the timing makes it sting. Miss Allerton's smile did this. A twitch of your mouth. That was all it took. Still, you show up on time, you roll up your sleeves, you plunge your hands into boiling water even when it bites your raw knuckles and makes you hiss under your breath. You scrub until your arms ache, wring out linen that feels heavier than your own body, and hang skirts so stiff with starch they creak when you fold them. The other laundry girl, Millie, doesn't say much. She squats silent and probably hasn't smiled since Victoria's coronation. But she's quick, efficient. She doesn't ask questions. You both fall into rhythm, scrub, rinse, twist, hang. The silence between you is almost companionable. Until Millie says, without looking up, "You upset her, didn't you?" You pause mid-fold. "Who?" She shrugs. "One of them. Don't matter which. They get bored, they look for trouble. Sometimes they find it." You don't respond. There's nothing to say. Here's a small cold fringe detail. Laundresses were often kept apart from the rest of the staff. Too sweaty, too noisy, too rough on the hands. And because of the chemicals, alkaline lye, boiling soda, bluing agents, their skin would chap, crack, and in some cases rot. One diary mentioned a laundress whose hands were eaten down to the bone. You look at your own hands, raw and swollen, and understand exactly what she meant. No one visits the laundry room unless they have to. You don't see Thomas. You barely see the housekeeper. You eat at a different table now, closer to the scullery, farther from the fire. It's quieter there, lonelier, ruhiger. The footman who usually winks at you doesn't meet your eyes anymore. The undermaid who used to lend you hairpins mutters about upstarts. You don't blame them, you know the rules. You just forgot for a moment that smiles aren't free. And yet, in the isolation, there's a strange kind of relief. No eyes on you, no bells, no stairs, no trays. Just laundry and endless, repetitive, punishing, but honest. You work until your back screams and your knees swell. You dream about towels folding themselves. You hear the hiss of the mangle in your sleep. On Thursday, you nearly fall asleep standing up. You drop a blouse in the rinse bucket and just stare at it for a full minute, too tired to fish it out. Millie notices. She hands you a tin mug of lukewarm tea. "Don't fall in," she says. That's the closest she's come to kindness all week. On Friday morning, you wake with blood on your fingertips. The cracks in your skin have split open. You wrap your hands in muslin and keep going. That afternoon, something unexpected happens. The housekeeper calls you to her office. You arrive with your sleeves damp and your apron stained and wait to be told you're being dismissed. But she just says, "Lady wants you back upstairs tomorrow. Miss Allerton's gone." That's it. No apology, no explanation. Just a flick of the wrist and your life unpaused. You nod. Say, "Yes, ma'am." Back in the laundry, you scrub harder. Not out of spite, out of clarity. If you're going to re-enter that world, you want to do it on your terms. Quiet, clean, controlled. Millie doesn't say goodbye the next day, but she tosses you a bar of lye soap. "Best for collars," she says. You thank her. You actually mean it. The next morning, you put your uniform back on like armour. The good one, the crisp apron, the smooth hem. You tie your hair just right. You clean under your nails with a sewing pin and scrub your face until your cheeks sting. You look into the mirror above the scullery sink and tell yourself you're ready. The drawing room smells of violets again. The lamps are bright. The bell pulls are back in motion. You re-enter the house's bloodstream like a red cell that never should have wandered. You move silently, perfectly, no smiles, no glances. Miss Allerton's perfume still clings to the air like a ghost, but she's gone. Thomas finds you by the stairwell. Doesn't say anything, just lifts a brow and tilts his head like he's asking, "You all right?" You nod. That night you light the drawing room fire again. Same as always, you dust the mantel, you fluff the cushion, you straighten the piano stool even though no one's touched it in weeks. Then you catch your reflection in the glass again. Your face looks the same, your posture too, but something inside has locked down a little tighter. Not colder, not harder, just quieter. Some historians say Victorian servants lacked agency. Others argue they were the silent gears that ran the entire machine. And knew it. You're not sure either side gets it exactly right. What you know is this: you can survive a laundry room, you can survive a smile, you can survive being reminded of your place, and now you'll make damn sure no one forgets it. It's a strange thing, returning to the upstairs corridors like nothing happened. You glide past the green baize door with your tray, the tea perfectly balanced, your posture ironed straight, and not a soul comments on your absence. No raised eyebrows, no side glances, not even a whisper. It's like the week in the laundry room never existed, and somehow that's worse than if they had sneered. You're a ghost again, and this time you're doing your haunting with extra precision. You remember what it felt like to be noticed, just barely. A look here, a nod there. Now you're back to your natural state, furniture that breathes. The lady of the house calls for tea in the morning room. You bring it, of course, the way you always have. She doesn't look up from her embroidery, just says, "Place it there," and keeps stitching. Plum, the Pomeranian, growls lowly from under the settee, as if he too remembers the laundry and is unimpressed with your return. You set the tray down carefully. The china doesn't rattle. The sugar bowl is precisely centred. You turn to Gobo. "Leave the door open," the lady says, still not looking. "It's stuffy." You leave it open. As you pass through the hallway, you hear her sigh. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a breath. But one that says, "Things are still not quite right. Still no complaints. Not yet. The house is holding its breath." It's around this time that the new girl arrives. She's tiny, barely 15 if that, and so thin she looks like she might fold if the wind catches her wrong. Her name is Elsie. She's from Kent, or maybe Sussex. She doesn't quite know where, doesn't say much either. Her eyes are too wide, her apron too clean, and her hands shake when she tries to carry more than 2 teacups. They assign her to assist in the kitchens and shadow you upstairs, which you suspect is code for watch what the older one does and try not to ruin anything. You try to be kind. You remember what it felt like that first month, the weight of the expectations, the brutal learning curve, the way even the lamps seem to glare at you. But Elsie isn't ready. She flinches every time someone speaks to her. She drops things, she gets in the way. And worst of all, she asks questions. Questions about what she's supposed to do, about when she'll get a day, about whether she's allowed to write letters home. You don't answer most of them. You don't have the heart. One day, as you're both folding table linens in the back pantry, she asks you, softly, like she's asking where the salt is, "Do you think they notice us?" You blink. "Who?" She gestures upward, toward the ceiling, toward them. You hesitate. "Sometimes," you say, which is kinder than the truth. She thinks for a moment. "I thought maybe they'd ask my name." You don't tell her that they won't. Not unless you break something, or save someone, or die in front of them with a note pinned to your chest. You just nod and return to your folding. Later that week, she cries. Not loudly, just a leak of tears down her cheeks in the kitchen hallway after she gets shouted at for overfilling the coal scuttle. You hand her a rag. She sniffs, mutters an apology, and asks if she's going to get sacked. You tell her no, you don't know if that's true. That evening you find yourself standing outside the linen cupboard, the one by the blue guest room, the one no one likes, the one from Annie's story. The door is closed, always is, but tonight something compels you to try the handle. It's unlocked. You open it slowly, expecting darkness, but there's light inside, just a sliver from the crack under the adjacent window. The shelves are neat, folded sheets, clean, no trace of ghosts, no eerie chill, but you feel something, not a presence, just a memory pressing in. You think of Elsie asking if anyone sees her. You think of yourself at her age, trying to carry a tray without dropping it, biting your tongue raw whenever someone criticised your knot work or your dusting or the attitude in your silence. You close the door again, carefully, respectfully. Here's a fringe tidbit for your consideration. In some grand houses, senior maids were responsible for training the juniors. But there were no formal guides, no lessons, just observation and imitation, and consequences when it went wrong. Sometimes the younger girls got lucky, sometimes they got eaten alive. There's a scholarly argument that the class system worked best when the lower ranks reinforced it among themselves. The idea being, if you keep the younger ones in line, you don't have to challenge the ones above you. It's efficient, cruel, and sometimes true. You think of that when the housekeeper tells you Elsie needs hardening and you nod like you agree. But when you find her again, this time in the scullery, hunched over a chipped teacup and holding her elbow like it hurts, you sit beside her. You don't say much, you don't tell her it gets easier, because it doesn't, really. You just say it gets manageable. She wipes her face. "I want to go home." You nod. "We all do." That night you find an old pair of wool gloves in your trunk. Too small for you now, but still warm. You place them in her bunk, say nothing. The next day she wears them without a word, and you both carry the tea trays with steady hands. She still flinches, still asks questions, but less often. You watch her learn the steps, like you did. You wonder how long it'll take before she forgets what warmth felt like. It begins with a cart, not a carriage, not a coach, just a low wooden cart drawn by a tired-looking horse and driven by a man with a beard that looks like it was grown out of stubbornness rather than style. The cart clatters down the gravel path to the kitchen entrance just after noon, and the cook clicks her tongue as she spots it through the window. "That'll be the lard," she mutters. "But you know better. That cart means more than lard. It means supplies, it means letters, it means news. You're chopping root vegetables," the knife rhythmic against the board, the smell of onions stinging your eyes when it happens. A voice at the kitchen door, deep and rough as a quarry wall, calls out, "Post from London." Everyone stills, even the scullery boy, "Hoi," because post doesn't come often. And when it does, it comes with weight. Sometimes hope, usually dread. You're not supposed to have mail, of course, not unless it's cleared by the housekeeper. All letters must be read first, all ink approved, all envelopes opened with the sharp eye of suspicion. The cook shuffles to the door, signs the delivery log, and collects the brown-papered bundles. Flour, salt, sugar, wrapped like humble treasure, and among them a small pile of letters tied with twine. She turns them over slowly, scanning the names. She calls yours, your name, out loud. It takes you a moment to react, as if hearing your name spoken above a whisper has broken some ancient spell. You step forward. She hands you the letter. No expression, no warning, just paper and ink and permission to feel something. You take it with trembling hands. It's from your sister. You know before you open it. You recognise the handwriting, sharp, neat, slightly anxious. You slip the letter into your apron pocket and excuse yourself. The attic is cold and quiet when you reach it. You sit on the edge of your cot, still in your kitchen apron, and peel open the seal. 3 pages. The first is filled with greetings and updates. Your younger brother has found work in a bakery. Your uncle is ill again, but not gravely. The neighbour's cow has escaped twice. You smile at that. You can still picture its lumbering indignity. The second page changes tone. Your mother's condition has worsened. They've written the local doctor. He's not hopeful. They can't afford a specialist. She asks, gently, if you might be able to send something, anything to help. Not money, not quite, but something. You fold the pages carefully. You don't cry. You lie back on the cot and stare at the beams above. And then, without thinking, you take off your shoes. They're the pair with the thicker soles, still intact. You clean them nightly, polish them on Sundays, treat them like the last piece of dignity you own. You wrap them in paper and tie them with string. The next morning you slip the parcel into the outgoing postbasket near the stables. You write your sister's name in ink. You don't ask for permission, you just place it there and walk away. Here's your strange little fringe fact for the day. Some Victorian servants kept departure bundles hidden under their beds, small packs of personal items they'd grab if they were fired, dismissed or forced to leave suddenly. Some had money sewn into hems, some had photos, lockets, even letters. Your bundle now has a hole where your shoes used to be. You don't tell anyone about the letter, except Thomas. You catch him by the rain barrel after supper. You don't say much, just, "She's not well." He doesn't ask who, doesn't need to, and he just says, "I'm sorry," and means it. Then a week later, more news comes. The Baroness is returning. You hear the news from the butler, who announces it in the servants' hall with the gravity of a coronation. She will arrive Friday. Expect nothing to be the same. And just like that, the house enters a state of advanced performance panic. The carpets must be rebeaten, the brass retouched, the menus restructured. She doesn't like lamb, or peas, or bread with too much crust. She wants tea at 4 and again at 6. She requires a hot bath every evening, but only if there are exactly 3 lavender sprigs in the water. The panic trickles down like melted wax. You are sent to re-iron the napkins, all of them, even the ones that have never been unfolded. The housekeeper's voice rises in pitch by the day. The footman looks sick. The cook mutters old curses under her breath and peels potatoes like they're offensive. You find yourself standing in the drawing room polishing the piano keys with a toothbrush. Not because it needs it, because it might. The Baroness arrives precisely on time. Her carriage is black. Her coat is black. Her hair is red, tightly coiled, and terrifying. She steps through the door and doesn't greet a soul. Her presence enters before her body rehearse, and the hallway goes colder by a full degree. You keep your head down. You serve her tea without a tremble, but when you leave the room you notice your heart is racing. She's not the worst thing about this house, but she is the sharpest. That evening you find a note tucked behind the servant's stairwell lantern. Thomas's handwriting. Tomorrow, same place. You don't hesitate, and you sneak outside just before 10. The garden is empty, the moon is high, the roses are brittle with early frost. He's waiting. You sit on the bench beside him, barely touching. "You're all right?" he asks. You nod. He doesn't ask more. Instead, he pulls something from his pocket. It's a coin, a small one, worn. "It's my father's," he says. "Had it since I was 5. He presses it into your palm. "I'll get it back from you. Someday." You say nothing, you just hold it. Tight. Because you know what he means. Because someday doesn't happen here. Not for people like you. Unless you make it. Sunday arrives, but it brings no rest. It never does. Not for you, not for any servant. The clocks may tick a little more slowly. The lady may spend more time at the piano, and the master might read his paper twice instead of once, but below stairs is just another day wrapped in stiff lace and false smiles. The only difference is that you wear your second best uniform instead of your third best, and you're expected to look not just competent but presentable, polished, grateful. You scrub your face until your cheeks glow, tie your apron so neatly you can't breathe properly, and make sure your boots, what's left of them, shine just enough to reflect the brass stair rods on your way up. You attend to your duties with a quiet, professional grace. No smiles, no glances, no mistakes, because this might be your last day. The Baroness is still in residence. She hasn't spoken to you directly, of course. She barely looks at anyone except the housekeeper and Plum the Pomeranian. But you've heard the whispers. She's made observations about the state of the household, about the efficiency of the service, and those observations have started to bloom into decisions. You hear it in the tone of the butler's voice, in the quick footsteps of the undermaids, in the tension that vibrates behind every doorframe. Then halfway through your afternoon duties, you're summoned. Not by bell, but by the housekeeper herself, who appears in the doorway of the servants' hall like a thundercloud in lace. "Upstairs," she says curtly. "The Baroness wants to speak with you, now." You blink. "Me?" She doesn't repeat it. She doesn't have to. You follow her up the stairs, every footstep echoing like it's announcing your fate. You think about all the reasons a servant gets called in for a direct audience with someone like her. You've been careful, haven't dropped a dish, haven't spilled tea, haven't let your eyes wander above your station, but still, you smiled once, and you disappeared for 5 minutes that night in the garden. And you sent your shoes away. She knows something, somehow they always do. The Baroness is seated in the morning room, upholstered like royalty in shades of maroon and disdain. Her gloved hands rest on her lap like she's waiting to be amused or disappointed. You curtsy, deeply, silently on. She gestures vaguely at the chair opposite her. Sit. You hesitate, then obey. This is the part where your body begins to vibrate with the kind of terror you can't show. You keep your posture straight, eyes slightly downcast, ready to apologise for things you haven't done, to explain away the ones you have, to plead in the most dignified tone you can manage. But she doesn't accuse, she asks questions. What village are you from? How long have you been in service? Can you sew? Do you know French? Can you read music? You answer them all, steadily, politely. You're not sure what she wants, but you sense it isn't justice. It's interest. Inspection. At the end, she taps her gloved finger against her knee and says, "You've a quiet manner, and a neatness to you, some polish." You say, "Thank you, ma'am," unsure whether it's a compliment or a threat. She tilts her head. "Have you considered seeking employment in town?" Your breath catches. You know what she means. She's offering a position somewhere else. Another house, another set of stairs, perhaps a promotion, or perhaps a test. But you also know what leaving means. No more Thomas, no more Elsie, and no more Plum even. You'd be just another servant in another house, starting over again at the bottom of a different ladder. You answer carefully. "I've considered it, ma'am." She nods, says nothing more. You're dismissed with a flick of her fingers. Back in the corridor, the housekeeper eyes you like she wants to ask what happened, but she doesn't. She just mutters, "Get back to the drawing room." You go, and you work, and you wait. Nothing changes that day. The bells ring, the soup is served, the Baroness retires, the fire is stoked, and life continues as if that conversation never happened. But something has changed. You feel it in the way the house breathes around you, in the look Thomas gives you that night at supper, in the hesitant thank you that Elsie whispers when you pass her the last clean towel. Later, while folding linens for the last time that evening, You catch sight of yourself in the mirror on the landing. And for once, you look, really look, at the cracked lips, the tired eyes, the shoulders that have carried too much and the hands that still sting from yesterday's starch. You've lasted here longer than most. You've learned the hidden codes, the invisible lines. You've endured the silent humiliations, the backhanded praise, the public silence. You've worked sick, you've carried secrets, you've fallen in love when you weren't allowed to. You've walked the line between servant and shadow, between girl and ghost. And now, finally, you're being asked if you want something else, something more. But as you stand there holding the linen, heart still soft from the weight of it all, you realise you don't know if you want to go. Because this house, for all its cruelty, has become a part of you. Or maybe you've become part of it. There's no dramatic ending here, no final insult, no triumphant escape, just the steady hum of work continuing. The lamps being lit, the coal being fetched, the night falling as it always does. And you keep going. Because in this house, survival is the story, and you've gotten very good at telling it. And now, as the lamps flicker low, and the fireplace shrinks to a bed of quiet coals, the house settles into something close to peace. Not joy, not warmth, but peace. The thin, brittle kind you've learned to accept like cold toast. Upstairs, the family has retired. The master has folded his paper. The lady has locked her jewel box. Plum, the Pomeranian, has finally stopped growling at shadows. And below stairs, the kitchen has gone quiet except for the faint drip of a leaking tap and the last clatter of dishes stacked for tomorrow's dawn. You, still in your apron, pause on the servants' staircase one last time, just to listen. You hear the house sigh through its old beams. You hear the ghosts shift, or maybe just the memory of them. You smell candle wax, chimney soot, and something softer, lavender perhaps, or the fading trace of someone's perfume long gone. And for once you allow yourself to stand still. You made it. You scrubbed the grates, washed the linens, stoked the fires, and dodged ruin in the form of bell cords, baronesses, and a whole bloody pyramid of upstairs expectations. You carried secrets, saw things you weren't meant to see, and somehow kept your shoes on, well, almost through it all. Maybe you didn't escape, but you endured. And in a world built on hierarchy and silence, endurance is its own kind of rebellion. So as the night deepens and your bunk calls to your aching bones, you press one hand to the wall, cool, familiar, worn smooth by years of unnoticed hands, and take a final breath. Not a sigh, not a sob, just a breath. You are still here, still whole, still you. Now pull the blanket over your tired frame, turn your face toward the plaster wall, and let sleep come like a reward hard-earned. The bells will ring again soon enough, but for now, you rest.